Um, I'm not usually the one that does this, so everybody bear with me for 1 second. There it is.
Perfect. And I'll tell you, if you don't mind, when to switch.
Okay.
Good morning. So I'm Lauren Gillespie. I'm the Transition Plan Program social worker and really happy to be here this morning. Before we start, I wanted to just acknowledge that transition is almost always a stressful process. Even if it goes smoothly, there's still that stress of the unknown, starting something new, navigating new territory. So because this is a caregiver focused symposium, I wanted just to share a quick like de-stress tool, something that you can do really fast if you're feeling overwhelmed, something that is very portable and also very quick, because I'm of the feeling that the simpler the better, because I can't remember long complicated breathing exercises. So if you already know about this technique, you can just sort of do it with me just for a moment of relaxation. But if not, it could be a new coping tool, something new to add to your toolbox. So it is called 5-finger breathing. So the way it works is you put your hand up, somewhere where you can see it, and you're going to breathe in as you trace up the side of your thumb, and then you're going to breathe out as you go down. And it's sort of the same idea throughout your whole hand. So for example, you'll be breathing in through your nose and then exhaling on the way down. And then breathing in through your nose and then exhaling through your mouth on the way down. Try it with me if you haven't yet. So inhale through your nose. And you can do that as many times as you need to. If you do it a few times, usually 3 or 4, you'll start to feel a sense of calm. And that can be really helpful in stressful moments and is kind of setting the stage for us to talk about transition, because it is a stressful time for most families. So let's go ahead and change the slide. So today I'm going to talk a little bit, just for a minute or two, about the mission of the Nemours Transition Plan Program, which stands for Preparing for Life After Nemours. We're going to talk about some common issues encountered in transition to adulthood. And then I'm going to talk about various resources in the community. And then finally, I'll take any questions that might pop up at the end. Next slide. So just a second about me. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. The majority of my background is from the adult world. I worked at Christiana Care for many, many years, and pretty much had the bulk of my career in social work at Christiana on the adult side of things, helping complex adults navigate systems, get resources, and sort of just deal with adult life. About 4 years ago, I came to Nemours thinking that it might be helpful to be able to speak with pediatric patients and their families about what to expect when they're getting ready to go out into the adult world. So I've been here at Nemours for about 4 years now, and really enjoy working with people and trying to help them, trying to make the transition a little bit easier. Next slide. So a quick overview of the Transition Plan Program. So we have 90-minute consultations with young adults who are starting their transition out of Nemours and into adulthood. We can start at 10, but we usually start seeing patients around 16 or 17. I do have a sprinkling of 14-year-olds that I see when people are starting to really get into that crunch time of thinking, oh, geez, the transition is coming. We see people yearly, but I'm always available in between consults if people want to go through something, or if they want to talk through, like, what did you say about SSI? Or if someone's having stress finding a provider. I just helped somebody who was a couple of days away from being 21 secure all their adult providers. They were just hitting some roadblocks. And then for 18 and over, Dr. Amy Renwick and I see patients together. But in 2023, we started something new, which was for under 18, we start with a phone consultation with me just to start thinking about transition, just to start getting resources in order and to answer some of the questions that are especially stressful for people as 18 approaches. And then after that meeting with me, after 18, the young adult in the family would come into the office to have that full 90-minute consultation where we'll focus on the adult providers and, not just the psychosocial topics that I cover, which I'm going to cover in a minute. Next slide. So one of the big questions that families and young adults with complex needs encounter are who is going to steer the ship? Who's going to be in charge of this complex medical condition? Who's going to be the one that we turn to when we have questions? So that is a big part of what we do after 18 is helping you select your young adult's adult medical team, which includes primary care, most likely, unless somebody already has a primary care that sees all ages. But most people have a pediatrician. I don't say most. A lot of people have a pediatrician. They need to transition to adult primary care. Specialists, if they have pediatric specialists, those need to be transitioned. Dental is something sometimes people don't think about, but that's something that often needs to be transitioned. And eye care is another one. Next slide. So this is just a slide of some local resources that might be helpful if you are in Delaware and you have a young adult with a special healthcare need. It's the Center for Special Healthcare Needs at the Wilmington Hospital. They serve 18 and older with any type of special healthcare need, including complex social situations like people aging out of foster care, people with other complexities, people who are undocumented, whatever is the social complexity. That's sort of what they're carved out to do. The doctors are family med and med peds, which means that they're certified in pediatrics and internal medicine. They really know how to treat people along the lifespan. They're very familiar with childhood onset conditions. The center has longer appointment times. It's accessible. They've got social workers, and I did work there for quite a while, so I can speak with confidence that you would get amazing care there. They also have special consultations for patients, including GI and psychiatry. So they're very comprehensive. They do help with dental. So if you're wondering who's going to steer the ship and you live in Delaware, even if you live a little bit far, it's really worth going to the center, in my opinion. They do telehealth because they are mindful that people come from all over the state because they are so unique. So just a couple other things they have is adult cerebral palsy clinic, adult urology for people with special healthcare needs, which can be really hard to find in the adult world, and adult CF clinic, cystic fibrosis, adult women's health for people with special healthcare needs. And some of these things you don't need to be a primary care patient for, you just need to need the service. An adult sickle cell clinic, which is within the last few years and was very desperately needed. Cancer survivors, it's very comprehensive. They do a wonderful job. So if you have a young adult who's getting close to 18 and you would like this special, like extra care, feel free to reach out to them. Next slide. Oh, I think you need to go back one more. Oh, so just to say, in case you have friends or family in other states, there is a similar practice in Pennsylvania called the Jefferson Fab Center, which is for adolescents and beyond. So that was started by one of the doctors who was and is at the center. She does the adult Down syndrome clinic. She started this primary care practice at Jefferson's Navy Yard to serve young adults in Pennsylvania with complex needs. And then in New Jersey, another one of the doctors, actually the doctor who did start the practice at Wilmington Hospital, Dr. LeCompte, went on to found Risen, which is very similar in New Jersey. There's also a couple of there's the Penn Adolescent Medicine Clinic that only goes to 30, but is a nice transition clinic as well. If you don't want to, some people don't like to go into the city, although the Navy Yard is just before the city, but still, some people don't want to go that way. Next slide. So these are the transition domains that I tend to cover as a social worker. Dr. Renwick tends to cover the medical. So in the appointment, she will sit down and talk about your specialist, your primary care, what you're looking for, and give some recommendations. And then I talk more about transition domains of these here, which I'm going to go through. Although I'm just going to touch on the legal very briefly because we have the wonderful Jackie from Classy speaking after me, who's going to talk more about that. Next slide. So one of the things that people are thinking about as a young adult, and the young adult themselves is thinking about as they're transitioning, is where are they going to live? I mean, do they always have to live at home with their parents? You know, is that feasible? Is that preferable? Where will they be in 5-10 years? So that's something that we talk about is residential options that, you know, you can consider. And there's a lot of different things that people do depending on how much support they need. But the main thing is that I like to make sure that people are connected with the right resources to support living. So for example, if somebody doesn't have DDDS, they might have a hard time having somebody come in for supports if they live in their own apartment or with a roommate, or if they live in like a group home setting. They really need to have either one of those waivers, which I'll talk about more in a minute, in place for those supports. So I just like to make sure people have the supports that they need. But there's a lot of different things, and really it's individual, you know, what people want in terms of housing and in terms of living, and things can change too. Something that's working right now might not work in 10 or 15 years. So I like to talk through that with folks. Next slide. Which brings me to the waiver, AKA what the heck is a waiver? Because this is like a really big point of confusion for people when they come into clinic. Either they've never heard that Delaware and all states pretty much have their own waiver system. And a lot of times I think the term waiver maybe has a little bit of a negative connotation. So people are like, what am I waiving? What am I giving up? But it's not really a fact of giving something up. It's more that Medicaid waives their usual rules and regulations so that people can receive the home and community-based care instead of, you know, having to live in a long-term care facility. So waivers do provide most of the supports needed for adults with special health care needs to live in their communities with the supports that they need. So for example, regular Medicaid in Delaware, at least, you know, and every state is very different. So I'm talking about Delaware since we're with PIC today. I'm talking about Delaware. Regular Medicaid typically doesn't pay for home modifications. However, a waiver usually does. And home modifications might be that thing that lets somebody live at home safely instead of having to live in a facility. So another thing that Medicaid doesn't provide for, you know, everyday folks who don't have a waiver is supported employment. But if you have the lifespan waiver from DDDS, then you will be able to take advantage of supported employment, having that support when you work to be successful in your job. So that's sort of like one of those things that I like to talk about just so that people understand what I'm saying when I say, oh, are you signed up with a waiver? Next slide. And I just wanted to just note what the waivers are. For in Delaware, there's the lifespan waiver from DDDS, and then LTSS, long-term supports and services, is through your Medicaid MCO, your managed care organization. And just to let people know that you can switch if you need to. It's not like this is a decision you're making and then you can never change it. You know, as needs change, you can change your waiver as well. And I do have a link on here for the comparison that was shared of the two waivers so that you can look at that and be like, okay, which waiver suits our needs now? Next slide. So another big point of stress for folks is what's going to happen when school is done. So what happens after either the young adult graduates from high school at 18, or if they stay longer till 22? You know, what's going to be like, are they going to sit at home not doing anything? That's, I think, the biggest fear is that they just won't have any purpose. There won't be anything to do. So we talk about like, will your young adult work? Will they volunteer? Will they go to a day hab program? Will they go to college? Will they go for a college-like program? There's different options out there these days. So like for somebody who might want to have a 4-year degree, but needs a little bit of extra support, you know, you're going to want to look into programs that provide that support, like for people on the autism spectrum. So there's college autism spectrum that provides like a listing of the different programs. So for example, Spectrum Scholars at UD, but every state now pretty much has some form of autism support for people who want to get that 4-year degree, but just might need a little bit of assistance and support. And then there's the college-like programs, like UD has Classic, where it's for people with intellectual disability to be able to go to college. They don't get the 4-year degree, but they get a certificate. They get a lot of job training, a lot of job skills. And I speak to that group pretty much every year. It's such a great program. And they learn a lot about independence, self-sufficiency. I mean, it's a really cool program. And again, those programs, if you look on Think College, which I have linked here, you'll see that there's a lot of programs like that popping up all over the country. And a lot of times, those are things that sometimes Voc Rehab can pay for. So you definitely want to explore funding sources for those type of things. And then I just want to always make sure people are connected with DVR, that they know about pathways to employment. And I always encourage people to speak with their DDDS community navigator or their LTSS case manager to discuss, depending on what their goals are. Next slide. So this is another thing that people really don't seem to, always know a lot about and have a lot of questions about. And there's a lot of things that float around out there where people hear bits and pieces and they're just like, oh, just tell me, what is SSI? What is SSDI? So it's just really quickly in a nutshell, that is something we talk about in clinic. And SSI, the big number to keep in mind is that if you haven't received SSI because your family income was too high, 18 is the age where you can apply and be looked at as an adult without your family's income counting toward that. So I talk about different things that affect how much SSI you might be able to get. And also just to, be realistic that not everybody who applies for SSI is going to be able to receive it. It's one of those things that a lot of people do get denied with. And then SSDI, which is interesting because a lot of times if your parent is either has passed away or is on disability themselves or has retired, a young adult might be eligible for money from their work credits, their parents' work history. And oftentimes that will end at 18 or 19, but if the young adult is deemed a disabled adult child or a DAC, they can continue to receive it. So a lot of times families don't know about that DAC program. So I always encourage people to go to SSA and talk to them about whether their young adult might be considered a DAC. And then of course, talking about how for adults, SSI is meant to go toward your room and board, your living situation. So if you are not already paying room and board to your parents, if you're living at home, that is something you definitely want to have a conversation about and, figure out what is your fair share of expenses? What are you going to be contributing to the household? And that's sort of a shift in, a kid doesn't really pay their fair share, but an adult does. So that's a shift in thinking about your child as they become an adult. Next slide. Oh, so yeah, I guess I jumped ahead of myself, but this is one of those things, my little SSI tips. The link at the top is an easy way to start the process. It's a link that you fill out and it sort of timestamps your interest in SSI. And then if you were approved, you get back pay to the date that you filled out this link. So this is like fairly new. They started this to make it a little bit easier. And then again, a lot of people apply for the first time at 18, or if your family was told, that you don't qualify in the past, it's a good time to try again at 18, again, because the family's income is not going to be counted. It's just going to be the young adult's income, which might be at 18, might be pretty low. And then I just have a link on there about understanding SSI living arrangements, which I think is pretty helpful. Next slide. So another topic that always comes up is insurance. So it's important to know that if you do get SSI, you will automatically get Medicaid in Delaware. And in most states, there's a couple exceptions. But it's kind of nice because if you get SSI, then you don't have to worry about your health insurance. You'll know you'll have your Medicaid. Even if you only get $1 in SSI, let's say you're working and your SSI dramatically decreases, you'll still get your Medicaid if you're getting anything from SSI, which is really nice. They have some special programs for workers too, so that they can work and keep getting their Medicaid and not have to worry about losing their waiver or other things that Medicaid pays for that regular insurance typically doesn't. And even if you don't get SSI, if you don't qualify, you might still qualify for Medicaid based on your income as an adult. So I always encourage people to speak with their social service center, their state service center, to see if they might qualify based on their income. Now, if you are getting SSDI from a parent's work record, you will likely get Medicare after a couple of years. And you might also get Medicaid or have Medicaid. If you have Medicaid, just definitely try to keep it. There's plenty of people who have Medicare and Medicaid, and that can be really helpful in terms of paying for things, copays and things like that. And again, you'd want to talk to your state service center if you have questions about how to keep your Medicaid if you end up with Medicare. Just also to keep in mind that if you're a parent and you get health insurance through your job, you might be able to keep an adult disabled child on the insurance past 26, which is the age where everybody else kind of has to leave their parents' insurance. So just talk to your HR about your particular insurance and see if that's an option, if that appeals to you. And then it would be like a lot of paperwork, but it'd be worth it if you want to keep that private insurance. A lot of people have private insurance and have Medicaid as a secondary. Next slide. So this is another thing that we talk about in clinic is if you are a person who gets SSI, you have to make sure you keep your resources and assets very low, under $2,000, to continue to qualify. There's a financial qualification. So one of the ways people can do that is through an ABLE account, which lets you save a lot more money than that, but keep your benefits. So let's say you get an ABLE account, you could put up to around $17,000 per year in that ABLE account and still qualify for your SSI as long as that money's in the ABLE account. It does cap at $100,000 total before you would lose SSI eligibility, but that's a lot better than $2,000. So it's really nice for people, who have disabilities or special healthcare needs who want to work and want to be able to save for something or do something, with their money and not have to spend it down on things they don't necessarily want or need. Similarly, there's the special needs trusts, which are special accounts where somebody could leave a young adult with special healthcare needs, a life insurance policy or a larger amount of money, and it doesn't affect their eligibility for their benefits that they get. So there's, I included a little bit of information on both of those things. Some people have one, some people have both. It just depends on your particular needs. It's just that the ABLE accounts, you wouldn't be able to leave a big life insurance policy to the ABLE accounts because they are set up to hold smaller amounts of money. Special needs trust, you can leave a lot more money to people that will be for things that, they might need that SSI or Medicaid doesn't cover. And then also with the special needs trust, there's a trustee controlling that money. So you don't have to worry about, the young adult having to manage that money if they're not ready to manage money. So those are two tools that we talk about in clinic as well. Next slide. So when I have a young adult in clinic, I always ask them, what do you think turning 18 is going to mean for you? How's that going to change things? And a lot of the times they just look at me blankly and they're like, I don't know. And a lot of times they're like, oh, I'm 18, I'll be able to do anything I want. And then their parents are like, mm-mm. So it's kind of I always like to see what comes up when I ask that question. But this is a really nice resource. This is a one-pager that talks about how turning 18, what it means for your health. So it's something that I give my patients so that they can kind of have a look at what turning 18 might mean for their health. And one of the main things that we talk about is that your healthcare information becomes private at 18. So you have to say whether you want someone to have access to it. So if you want your mom to be able to call and get your, blood test results, you have to sign paperwork saying that's okay. Or if you want your mom to come into an appointment, you have to be okay with that. Like somebody might ask you, oh, do you want your mom here? Or is this, do you want to be alone? And then you have to make that decision. So that needs a little more work in terms of getting things in place, which I know Jackie's going to talk about. So I'm going to stop here. But it is a big transition, and it does really stress people out. So I'll let Jackie take that when she has her part. Next slide. And again, I'm going to let Jackie talk about this, but this is a big thing we talk about in clinic. People aren't sure what's the right decision to make about decision making. And a lot of times I'll frame it as a toolbox where there's a lot of different tools you could use to help somebody make decisions. And guardianship is the biggest tool in the box. It's that saw with the orange handle there, but maybe you don't need the biggest tool in the box. Maybe you can use one of the smaller tools. And I'll stop there because Jackie's going to tell us about that. But it is something that is very stressful for families as 18 approaches and they know that their young adult is going to be an adult. Next slide. So kind of like what Nancy was talking about, every state has its own assistive technology centers and many feature lending libraries. So in Delaware, we have DADDY, the Delaware Assistive Technology Initiative at UD. And then we have the wonderful Easter Seals Resource Room, which if you haven't been there, definitely have to check it out either virtually or in person. I love going in there just because there's so many things that I'm like, ooh, neat. How does this work? How does that work? Nancy's giving me a thumbs up. She didn't tell me to say this. I tell everybody about this. But it's I always say to people, like, there's so much stuff out there that you don't even know exists that can make your life easier. So definitely a plug for assistive tech. Next slide. So I really like Got Transition, and I would encourage families to look at that website. Got Transition has a lot of nice resources for you to sort of assess with your young adult if they're ready to transition. If not, it gives you tips and tools. When people come to clinic, I give them a folder of resources, and this is one of the resources that I do tend to give. So there's a really nice one pager that has information about pediatric versus adult care and what's the differences. And so you can kind of go through that with your young adult and you can say like, okay, in pediatrics, it's automatic that your parents can come in with you. And often they do. But when you go to adult care, you have the choice whether you want to be seen alone or if you do want that support person to come in with you. And then another big difference is that in pediatrics, really, we mostly talk to the parents. In adult care, you're in the driver's seat as the young adult. You're the one who's going to be doing most of the talking. And in clinic, we do try to like sort of model that so that it's not so foreign once they get to the adult care. But the young adult is not used to being the one answering questions. They're not used to being the ones who have to give their med list. And that's something that we practice in clinic as well. So definitely check out Got Transition. It's a great resource, and I really do use it quite a bit. Next slide. So a big focus of our clinic is independence and taking ownership of one's health. So the goal is for the young adult to take as much ownership of their health as they're able to. So even if that means that you're not independent in taking your own medications, but what if you're the one who helps fill the pillbox? Or what if you're the one who has the reminder on your phone to take the medications and maybe you need a little bit of assistance taking them, but you're the one who's the main person getting that reminder. So we sort of brainstorm with families about what can they do to shift the responsibility a bit more to the young adult. And I will say that a lot of young adults really don't like this part because they like their parents doing things for them a lot of times. And I can say this, including my own young adults, they resisted a bit when it was time for them to take over their own health care. But we coach parents and the young adults to, sort of try something small at first. We always ask who makes the doctor's appointments. And if it's the mom, sometimes the mom or dad will be like, oh, I never even thought about it. Like, I just have always done it. And that is totally valid. And as parents, we do a lot for our kids. But we have to really be conscious of what they can do for themselves as they get older and give them those opportunities, even if it's uncomfortable. So like, for example, so my son is 20 and when it was time to make his first adult doctor appointment, we did it together. So I we got on speakerphone. I did most of the talking. He kind of sat there and listened and was sort of like, okay. And then the next time he did it, and I was sitting there more listening, and he fumbled through it. And after that, he said, okay, I think, it wasn't so bad. He still didn't really like it, but it's one of those tasks of adulthood. Nobody really likes it. And as time has gone on, he's really taken over that role, which has been great. But it's nice if you can start together and you can model it for them. And maybe you have a young adult who's never going to be able to be independent with making appointments. And that's okay, but see if they can start taking a role in it. And also, it's really nice, nowadays we have portals and we have other ways. We have most pharmacies have an app where you can refill your medications without really talking to people. So we talk about, like, does your pharmacy have an app? Can the young adult get the app on their phone if they use a phone? And that can be helpful too, just to get them started. Because really, if you think about it, you're training your replacement. So you're training the person who's going to take over their own health care, down the line. So whatever they can do, as much as they can do, it's always a good idea. And then we always just talk about, like, the importance of carrying your stuff with you. So, like, sometimes people will have a wallet or a purse or a lanyard. I know my girls tend to wear lanyards with their stuff. And getting your own insurance card. I was helping a young adult the other day make some appointments, and I was on the phone with her, and I was sort of listening to her do it, and I was there for support. And they asked about her insurance, and she just really froze and was like, I don't know. I don't know what it is, and I don't have a card. Well, luckily I was there, so I was able to look it up for her. And then right after we made those appointments, we called her health insurance and ordered her own card. And we talked a little bit about what is health insurance and, like, what does that mean. So these little things that as adults we just know we need to do, they're still learning that. So next slide. And then, it's not all serious. We like to talk about recreation and things that people might want to do. So just some examples, like Art Therapy Express. I had a patient the other day who was really interested in going to college for art, but she was taking a gap year. And I said, oh, well, maybe you could be a mentor, or maybe you could ask to volunteer at Art Therapy Express and get some great experience, get to do some art. And, that was just something that I thought might appeal to her. I like to see what people are interested in. But there's lots of stuff out there. ARC has a new self-advocacy group for adults. There's a lot out there. So that is something that we explore in clinic as well. Next slide. So I'm getting to the very end of my talk, which I'm right on time. But I wanted to leave some time for questions. And if you have any questions around transition, I would be happy to speak to them.
I have a question pertaining to the ABLE account and the special needs trust. With both of those, I know you said that you have the option to pick the two. Are you able to, or has it even been recommended to do both accounts, like set up the two different, like the trust and the regular ABLE account?
I'm really glad you asked that, Anya, because to get more specific, so the ABLE accounts you can open yourself online. Super easy. You only need $50, I think, to open those. The special needs trusts are a little more complicated. You have to go through a lawyer for those to set those up. So it's a little bit of a commitment financially, and you can't do it yourself. You have to have somebody help you. There's a couple of resources I can send you to get something like that set up. But a lot of people like both because they're a little bit different in terms of accessibility. So, like, if you have a special needs trust for a young adult, there's a trustee. That young adult's not touching that money without somebody being there to approve it. But with an ABLE account, you can oftentimes get a debit card where the young adult can work on money management. So that money is a bit more accessible, and they can kind of like do it themselves with your support. And you can kind of make it like a teachable moment type of account.
Great. I would definitely, if you can, I would like to get the resource information for both of those, please.
Yes, I will email you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Great question though, Anya. Thank you.
So mine isn't a question, but I just have a comment that I want to toss out there. I can't say enough good things in support of that Got Transition website. I love that. that stuff has so much on there. It's just the resources. It's really great, and it's so. I mean, you mentioned it in your presentation, and I just wanted to back you up on that one. I think it's fantastic, and so I highly recommend everybody go in there. There's a lot of information there if you just have questions, and it's 8 o'clock at night and there's nobody you call. You go on that website and you can look up a lot of really nice stuff. So it's fantastic. It's a really good resource.
What's also nice about it is they have provider resources as well. So if I have a doctor, so we get a lot of residents in our clinic. So if I have a resident who's interested in transition, I can just point them right to that website too, because there's a lot of provider information on there too. It's very comprehensive.
It is.
And I know they speak with PIC sometimes. Sometimes they partner with you to speak about their resources and such. So they're sort of a part of the PIC family a bit.
Yeah.
Suzanne, did you think of your question you had for me earlier in the week? I'm putting Suzanne on the spot.
I didn't. Probably Monday when I get back into my caseload, it'll come to me and I'll just call you, because no, I didn't think of it.
Well, no worries. If you want to go to the next slide, it's got my contact information. So anybody can feel free to reach out to me. We, for clinic right now, for 18 and older, we have about a 3-month waiting list. We just have a lot of people who are trying to see us. So if you do want to come see us, make sure you give us a call. That 651-5502 is our scheduler. And she can get you on the schedule for fall. But if you have somebody who's under 18 and you want to talk to me, you can feel free just to give me a call directly at the 4812. And then I have one more slide, which I think is just some resources.
Lauren, there's a question in chat.
Oh, I can't see the chat.
Okay, well, it is, can you buy a house and put that house and income from that house in the special needs trust for that child?
There are options to put houses in special needs trust, but you definitely want to talk to your lawyer about that, because I don't know exactly how that works. But I know that some people have their house and they want it to be where their young adult lives forever. And whether they maybe bring in a roommate or two and connect with DDDS maybe to have the supports in place, that is definitely, you can be pretty creative if you own a house and you want to leave it to your young adult. That is definitely, there's room in special needs trust for that. So you definitely want to talk to your lawyer or whoever helped you with the trust. But yes, I think that's definitely a feasible option. Oh, I can't see the chat now. Oh, great. And these are just a couple of resources that I thought might be helpful. And that's it for me. Thank you so much for listening.
It helps if I take myself off mute. Thank you, Lauren. I always learn new things when I go to a presentation from Lauren. So thank you for that. Do we want to take about a 5-minute break before we jump into Jackie's portion? I don't know if anybody needs one.
They might need it after my portion, to be honest.
All right, well, I'll tell you what, we'll go ahead and just keep going.
Yeah, get ready for your heads to explode after Jackie, because that's a big part of things that people leave clinic and they're like, oh.
We get a lot of questions too at PIC. People call in when their child is 19 or so, and they say, well, why has everybody stopped talking to me? And they're very surprised. I know that when my oldest transitioned, I had not thought about it at all. When my son, who's my second child, was getting ready to go to college, we had all the legal paperwork done before he left. So yeah, all right, I'm gonna, Jackie, share yours and we will keep going. Here we go.
Awesome, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name's Jacqueline Sayers Rosario. I go by Jackie. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what age of majority is and the fun topic of decision-making options. Next slide. So just a disclaimer, because I do work for Classy, which is a law office, this isn't intended to be legal advice. This is just very general information. And we understand that everyone's situation is different. So the options that I'm going to talk about today, it's just information for you to consider. And just disclaimer as well, we do not do guardianships at Classy. We do every other decision-making option that I'm going to talk about, just not guardianship. Next slide. Okay, so just a little bit of who Community Legal Aid is. So we are housed, the Disabilities Law Program is housed under Community Legal Aid. We are a private nonprofit law firm. We offer services for free for civil legal issues. So the Disabilities Law Program, as you might see, is one of our 6 units. We have a bunch of other units. Next slide. So I'm here representing our Disabilities Law Program. I'm actually a paralegal / advocate in the program. And we serve as a protection and advocacy system for the state of Delaware. There is a PNA in every single state. We are the go-to for any disability-related issue. And as you see on this list, we do handle a variety of issues. We do direct representation. We do systemic work. And we also do issues related to decision-making. Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about what age of majority is. So as Lauren shared, this is really the transition from child to adult. It is a very scary transition. Legally speaking, all it means is when an individual turns 18. So as we all know, transitioning from child to adult, there are a few duties that just automatically pop up. So some of those civil, voting, jury duty, if you work, filing taxes, paying your own bills, healthcare, which I'm not going to touch on because Lauren did a great job, as well as other responsibilities. Next slide. So one of the big topics as to why age of majority is so important is that once you turn 18, you as the individual are assumed to have capacity. So your child is assumed to have capacity no matter what. So as Lauren had shared, if they're coming into a doctor's appointment, it may very well be that the staff are just talking to your child, to your adult child, and not really addressing you because they by law have to assume that they have capacity. Next slide, please. So what is capacity? And this is a very difficult topic. So it's basically being able to enter into a contract. So being able to understand what you're getting as well as what you're giving up. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means when talking about decision-making and the different options. Next slide, please. So things to consider. So the right option in terms of decision-making will really, really depend on what the individual's needs are. And we'll talk a little bit more about that throughout today. Next slide. Okay, this is a big issue that comes up when I have discussions with parents. The number one reason why they want to seek any type of decision-making document is because they are afraid that their young adult is going to make bad decisions. And I always try to talk through with parents about this. The fear is there, it's evident, but we all learn from making bad decisions. So that shouldn't be the only reason that you're committing to a certain type of decision-making document. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about adult guardianship. I know Lauren had mentioned it as the big tool in our toolbox. So this is typically the one that everyone is aware of. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about it because it there are other options, but I also want people to understand what guardianship means, because sometimes people just say, oh, just get guardianship and it'll all be okay. But families don't necessarily understand what guardianship is. Next slide, please. So here are a few reasons why a person might need a guardian. So, you know, either due to their physical or mental disability, they just don't have capacity. They don't have that capacity to be able to negotiate or understand what they're going to be signing or getting into a contract or anything like that. So, or they're unable to manage themselves. So they're physically unable to care for themselves. They wouldn't be able to manage that and would need someone to do that for them. Next slide. So there are two types of guardianships. So you can get guardianship over the person, which is exactly how it sounds. This is guardianship over the individual themselves, over, for example, you know, their choices in terms of employment, where they want to live, any other type of contract that they might sign up for. And in terms of property, that is specifically like financial, home, trust, any assets. Most people get both. They want to be able to have control over everything. There's also limited guardianship. So if there's only concern relating to something very specific, then there is limited guardianship now in Delaware. And so the process for getting a guardianship is filing a petition through court, the Court of Chancery. You can do this alone, or you can hire an attorney. I've had parents share that they've done the process alone and it's been very smooth. But in terms of being the guardian, there is fiduciary duties that you have as the guardian. So you have to report accounting, you have to keep track of accountings reported to the court. And then fiduciary duties are more listed in the statute itself, but it's basically saying you have to act on the best behalf of the individual. So if you're going to sign up to be a guardian, you have to do your job and make sure that the individual is doing well, that they're safe. Next slide, please. And I believe I have a question, and I did see your question, Cynthia. Hold on. They are not. And I'm going to talk about POAs a little bit more, but thank you for bringing that up. So a little bit of the limitations, durations, and challenges of guardianship. So without a court, so basically if you're a guardian, you have to go through the court to do the following things. So make a will, release any claims, title to real property, sterilization, involuntary commitment to an institution. So just because you're guardian doesn't mean that you could just make these decisions automatically. A guardianship will typically last until the individual passes or until the court terminates it, because someone brings up, you know, this guardianship should be terminated. I will say that the experience overall is that it is very hard. It's not impossible, but it can be very challenging to terminate a guardianship, which is why we always encourage parents to think about what other decision options or what other tools can they use before committing to guardianship. Next slide. Okay, so under guardianship, there is a special topic that we always discuss, which is voting. Because sometimes people believe that because they have a guardian or have guardianship over them that they would not be able to vote or register to vote. That is not the case. An individual with a guardianship is still able to vote unless it's restricted by the courts. Next slide. Yep, so only a judge is able to take away a person's right to vote. Next slide. Okay, and this is just big picture. Pros and cons of guardianship. You know, a lot of families, you know, they get a guardianship because they want that sense of protection. They don't want their adult child to make bad decisions. So this is a way to kind of control that. It's convenient. And then the cons, you know, as you will see, it may be unnecessary. It can be an instrument of abuse because you're basically stripping this individual from having any rights for making any decisions for themselves. And it's extremely disempowering, right? Because this person doesn't have self-autonomy. You know, basically you're reducing them to the level of a child. Next slide. Okay. So I got a little bit ahead of myself, but why consider alternatives? Just as I said, you know, it strips away basic rights and privileges that we all kind of gain as we enter adulthood. And it can be a very extreme solution and a challenging one to then terminate. Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to get to alternatives to guardianships. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the alternatives to to guardianship is supportive decision making. So supportive decision making is fairly new, and it is a method of assisting people in making decisions. So a supportive decision maker basically empowers a person who has capacity to help making decisions. So if you are a supportive decision maker, you are given the authority to be able to collect information for an individual and help them make a decision, but the individual themselves is still able to make the final decision. So they still have say in whatever it might be, financial, healthcare. Next slide. Okay, so the supportive decision-making agreement is a written agreement. It has specific requirements, including having to have it be witnessed by 2 individuals, but it covers health, it covers supportive services, including educational services, it covers financial affairs, and it also has an area where you are able to list the things that you wouldn't want your supportive decision maker to assist you with. So Delaware actually has a standard form that we use in our office. And it basically allows you to add any specifics that you want into each category. And then it's a really easy process. You would have your supportive decision makers, the individual, and then the 2 witnesses just all sign off, and then you're ready to go with your supportive decision-making agreement. Next slide, please. Okay. So like all of these documents, it's very important that you make sure that your supporters are trustworthy. You know, they're willing to act and they're going to act on your best behalf. And they can be family members, they can be friends, it could be a caregiver, anyone in the individual's life who they trust that's going to be able to help them. And similar to the guardianship, a supportive decision-making agreement can be revoked. It's a lot more easier than a guardianship, but if at any time the individual decides like this isn't working, or a specific person, they no longer want to assist them with supportive decision-making, they can always come back and say, look, I want to change this. Next slide. Okay. So power of attorneys. So durable power of attorneys are another mechanism that's available. What makes this a little bit different than supportive decision making is that power of attorneys are very financially driven. And in a power of attorney, you're giving authority to someone else to be able to make decisions. That doesn't necessarily mean that the individual themselves can't. You're just appointing someone else to be able to do it in addition to you. So it's also a drafted document. This one requires you to have to notarize, and it requires a witness. And one big notice that we always let our parents know is that a power of attorney is not for healthcare decision making, because they often get confused. Next slide. Okay, so for a power of attorney, you can decide whether you want this document to take effect immediately or once the individual loses capacity, and that's the springing versus non-springing. So if you wanted to spring into action when an individual is no longer able to make their own decisions or has capacity to be able to, or do you just want it to be non-springing and take effect immediately? And that's a conversation that we have with individuals when we discuss potentially drafting a power of attorney. So the power of attorney includes a lot of information about estate, trust, but it also includes a few other aspects, including family maintenance, public benefits. And when it talks about family maintenance, it includes basically the things that you would need to be able to function. So, if, for example, you need to update your license, a power of attorney can go and help you and do that. If you need assistance with filing taxes, your power of attorney can help you with doing that. They won't, they don't pay your taxes, but they'll assist you with that. If you have any civil related matter, a power of attorney can go to court on your behalf. And so when we draft power of attorneys in our office, we typically add language regarding disability advocacy as well as health records. So we include language that allows the power of attorney to be able to reach out to the different advocacy organizations that are involved in the individual's life, and to be able to request records from their MCO, so their managed care organization, or any of these specific agencies. It is a very effective tool. And similar to the guardianship, the agent is under fiduciary duty to act on the individual's best behalf. Of course, there is risk of abuse because, like I said, this is a very financially driven document, and you're giving authority for someone else to be able to act on your behalf. Next slide. Okay, so advanced healthcare directives. Most people know these as a healthcare power of attorney, and it is. It's kind of a mix blend of a living will and a healthcare power of attorney. So the living will aspect of it allows you to express end of life decisions. So any instructions that you want to leave to an agent. And then the healthcare power of attorney aspect allows you to pick a specific agent to be able to make healthcare decisions if an individual becomes incapacitated. And of course, like all of these documents, the individual must have capacity when creating it. Next slide, please. So what does this document look like? So it includes specific instruction for agents. These instructions can vary from this is what I want at my funeral, or this is what I don't want to ever receive if X, Y, or Z happens. So I don't want to be resuscitated. I don't want CPR, like that. It includes an area for you to choose whether you would like to donate organs. It does cover the Delaware scope of medical treatment form. And The uniqueness of this document is that it only goes into effect when a physician determines that the individual lacks capacity. So it's not something like the POA, where you can choose, agents to kind of pop in or out. This one is more, the health physician is the one who determines whether you have capacity or don't have capacity, and it only goes into effect when the individual doesn't have capacity. So if an individual does draft this document and has capacity, then it's fine. It wouldn't go into effect. It's just drafted just in case. And a lot of our clients do come in and draft this to have just in case, because if something were to happen to you where you wouldn't be able to make those decisions, you already have this document in place and it's in your records as to these are going to be my agents. And this one does not need to be notarized, but does require 2 witnesses. Next slide. Okay. And I kind of spoke about this a little bit, but it goes into effect when the individual lacks capacity, and that determination is made by the physician. And a good point is if that individual does lose capacity, but then regains capacity, the document itself doesn't take effect. So it goes dormant again. Next slide.
I hit scroll, Jackie, so help me figure out where to go.
Oh, 27, it should be the next slide. Yes, thank you. There you go. So healthcare surrogacy is similar to the supportive decision making in that it's new in the sense that a lot of parents don't really know that it exists as an option. So it's fairly unique and it's fairly simple. So an healthcare surrogacy allows you to designate a decision maker when there is an agent, a guardian, or an individual doesn't have an advanced healthcare directive, because not everybody wants to make one. And it can be done when an individual has capacity or lacks capacity. So if an individual has capacity, if your young adult has capacity and is able to say, look, I want X, Y, or Z to be my healthcare surrogate, they can make that statement to their doctor, and then their physician will add it to their record. They will have a witness come in, typically a nurse or a staff, and then it's noted in their record. They can also say, I don't want this person specifically to ever have access or to ever act as my surrogate. So they can do both. And if your young adult does not have capacity or lacks capacity, then the doctor themselves can put in a statement as well that they lack capacity. And then that's recorded in their chart. And then there's the statute prioritizes relatives as healthcare surrogates. So as you see in this list, it typically starts as spouse, an adult child, parent, adult sibling, adult grandchild, adult niece or nephew, or a close friend. What it does not include in this list, which we have often found as an issue, are grandparents. Sometimes grandparents are kind of the only family that individuals might have. So we try to work through, okay, what other options might exist for grandparents. Next slide. Okay. So this is, so healthcare surrogates have decision-making authority similar to the Advanced Healthcare Directive. That's why it's either or. You typically don't have both. But similarly, they have access to health information. They're able to talk about care. They're able to come into doctors' appointments, get records and everything. Similarly, as if your adult child says, okay, yeah, I'm allowing them to come into my appointment. The only downfall for healthcare surrogacy is similar to the POA, in which it only applies to healthcare situations. So just as POAs are very kind of financially driven, healthcare surrogacy only covers health, and no other decision-making options outside of that. Next slide. Okay. So Lauren touched a little bit about Social Security, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Social Security representative pays, because this is also an additional tool. So SSA will appoint a representative payee for a recipient who receives SSI or SSDI when needed. So when would an individual require a representative payee? If the individual doesn't have capacity to manage their own funds. So this doesn't have to mean legal capacity. It just might mean that this individual just doesn't know what it is to budget, to pay bills. They just wouldn't be able to do that. And it's exclusively just for Social Security. So just the funds that this individual will receive from Social Security. And it's done voluntarily. So if the individual, if your young adults is receiving these services and says, look, I need help. Like, how do I do this? Like, how do I keep track of my Social Security? How do I report, if they're working? So you can go to the Social Security office and they can say, look, I would like to appoint X person as my representative payee. Or you can also ask a doctor to make the referral. It's a very useful tool, but it can lead to some issues if the individual does choose to have a representative payee, because now their representative payee manages their funds. So that representative payee is in charge of making sure that they keep track of the funds, but also because they have control over the funds, they can decide, okay, I'm going to give you X amount of money for you to spend, or this is how we're going to manage your funds. So that can lead to some negative dynamics. But other than that, it's a very kind of simple tool where you don't necessarily need to go into a law office or anything. This can definitely be something where you just go to Social Security and say, can I get a representative payee? Next slide. Okay. So we did include some other additional options that don't necessarily require you coming into a law office to get them done. So case management, care management systems, there are a few throughout the state. Some of them do, some of them also stand in as guardianship sometimes, but others like DDDS will, using your Columbus Navigator, sometimes DDDS will step in and manage funds like a representative payee. So working with community advocacy system or community agencies is also very helpful. You can establish a trust. I know Lauren discussed special needs trusts. You can do joint checking accounts, but we typically don't recommend this unless you really, really trust whoever you are creating the joint account with. Release forms are really effective. I have often had conversations with families and young adults, if they just want mom, dad, whoever it might be, to be able to access information or just call, like Lauren said, to get those blood work results. Then signing release forms and doing all of that before the time comes is really helpful. When we do supportive decision-making agreements in the office, I will typically attach release forms for all the agencies that the individual has involved in their care, so that when parents or the supportive decision maker shows it, there's a release sign in the back and there isn't any question about, oh, well, we still need a release. And the last one, which I know a lot of parents who have probably worked with PIC have had a discussion about, is the Educational Representative Voluntary Grant of Authority. So if your young adult is a student who's receiving special education services, and they can't make decisions or they would like someone to help them, they can designate that authority to you. And this includes students who are in the 18 to 22 program. So just to keep that in mind, if your child is in that program, this might be a very helpful tool. Next slide. Okay, so I just wanted to share kind of like the thinking process and that I go through with families when they come into our office to discuss these issues. So when thinking about what might be the best tool for your young adult, just think about what are your specific fears and concerns. It's great to put them out there, both as a parent and also what fears does the young adult have? You know, what do they feel they can do with supports, and what do they feel that they just wouldn't be able to handle? Having that conversation ahead of time is super important. Next slide. So, and this is the conversation that we have. So are there concerns about financial affairs? So handling the finances. Could we consider a representative payee? Would a power of attorney help? Would a trust, a special needs trust, enable account help? Are there concerns about healthcare? If so, would release forms be okay? Would we want to get an advanced healthcare directive? Is there somebody else, DDDS or another agency out in the community that would be able to help? Or do we want to do a supportive decision-making agreement? So we have these conversations with families come into our office to discuss this transition to age of majority. Next slide. Okay. And I guess the overall big point is if your fears can be addressed without seeking guardianship, then there's no reason to get a guardianship. And if they're not, at least you consider the other options. We're not saying that guardianship isn't appropriate, because there are situations in which it is, but we want families and young adults to consider other less restrictive options before just guardianship. Next slide. Okay. So this is our contact information. We do have offices in every county. And I'll put my personal information in the chat because I didn't include a slide with my info. But if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask while I put my information in the chat, I will open the floor to questions.
Jackie, I actually have 2 questions currently. The first question is, with the limited guardianship, could limited guardianship be over the finances and the child's property?
Yes. So that's why it's kind of a special, it's a special guardianship, because it's really specifically to whatever you want it to be. So that's why it's considered limited. So it could be as limited as to just, I don't know, let's just say an example. It could be limited to just like money that's going into a trust. But it could be very specific. And the court actually designed limited guardianship while COVID was happening, because as you might imagine, there was a rush for a lot of families to be like, oh, I need to do something because I need to make sure that they're getting care. There was so much going on. But yes, limited guardianship would be to a very specific category.
Okay. Another question. I got a few questions. So
Sure.
the SDM, it requires 2 witnesses. So I did see it could be another family support person. If the child feels as though that there's not another support person, as far as just a parent or guardian, what other type of avenues could we kind of look at? Because he's very big on, his trust is not, really there, and he'll be 18 in 10 months.
Yeah. So it could be a friend, it could also be a mentor. I've seen, not that I always recommend it, but there are individuals that will do a caregiver. So if there's someone who is coming into the home, someone who he's worked with that he really trusts, I've seen an individual do like a professional in that sense, like someone who has been in their life for a while. So if there is somebody, and maybe we can brainstorm a little bit more about that. But in reality, it could be anybody who he would trust, but it would also trust to act on his best behalf, right? Because that's
Of course.
where the big issue I think most families find, like, okay, yeah, we have people, but are these people going to be there and act on his best behalf and not push him, to go either way, and let him have the space to be able to make decisions.
Yeah, because that's where my biggest concern really is. I was telling Lauren like yesterday, I'm really his only person, at this time that he really trusts. And I'm like, well, 10 months, time, you'll be 18. So making those type of decisions, there's not many people, that let alone like he trusts, but that I trust with making those type of decisions. Because God forbid if something happens to me, I just want to know that he's okay, So that's why I really wanted to ask, because I know that with that STM, my biggest concern for him is the financial aspect, because he is not, he doesn't know currently how to budget, or even if he goes into the store, knowing that, well, Jaden, you got to get your change, or, you don't want anybody to get over on you. So that's where our biggest concern for him is at this point, with the financial aspect, and really, entrusting someone to take on that responsibility if I'm, not here.
Yeah. And I would say, at least for the supportive decision-making agreement option, the person wouldn't necessarily be making the decisions, they would be helping gather information. So just to keep that in mind, like if you're looking for someone to actually be able to go to the bank and take money out of his account, or be able to have access to do something like that, that would be more like a power of attorney, where he designates it to someone to be able to act, without necessarily waiting for him to do it. So the supportive decision making puts the power, doesn't strip that away from him, if that makes sense. Like the supportive decision maker would be gathering information. So as you were saying, in terms of budgeting, like you would be able to say, like, these are your bank statements, like this is how, this is what keeps track of your money, this is how you can see how you spend. You can bring in information about banks, about what the different accounts are. So you would be supplying the information for him to eventually make the decision. And I just want to make sure that you understand that that's the difference. You wouldn't necessarily, you or anybody else wouldn't be making the decision for him. He would have the last call. You would just be gathering that information for him to make an educated decision.
Okay. And last question. This is pretty much, I keep saying this 10 months, like it's here before you know it. But the last question, like now pretty much is the best time to start getting these things in order, correct? Because within those 10 months, like I don't want it to be where it's down to crunch time and trying to, and I know, processes take time, and the time. So now will be the best time to get connected with Classy for these types of things.
So it would be a good time to get connected, to have the conversation.
Yes,
We
ma'am.
can't really start like the process itself until he turns 18, because that's when he has the age to be able to sign off, sign off on a contract, to be able to legally sign off and say, this is what I want, or this is my agreement. So we can engage in the conversation. I have done that with parents. We've talked about it. We've discussed. Sometimes I'll even invite the client in, because to start gaining that trust and having that conversation before they turn 18. And then what I'll do is once he turns 18, we can call you back and say, okay, he turned 18, we're ready to go. That's kind of the way that I would approach it. Because like I said, he wouldn't be able to sign off or do anything until he really turns 18.
Absolutely. So I would actually like to get that process started. So I would just call the Newcastle County office and just,
Yes. Yep.
you know,
And then if you have any issues getting through, I'm going to include my, there we go. So in the chat, I included my direct line. So if you have any issues getting through the front, I'm happy to just do everything back house, with you.
awesome. I appreciate it. I got it. Thank you for answering all my questions.
Of course. Any other questions?
I just have a statement. Jackie, you're awesome. Thank you so much. What you do.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Well, if anyone has any questions, I'll be here for the rest of the event, and feel free to reach out anytime.
Thank you, Jackie. Yep, I second Lauren. You're wonderful. We're so lucky to have you. And I really appreciate all that you presented this morning.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely, I agree. We're all very lucky to know you.
Agreed.
Oh, I also do want to share this real quickly. So I am our bilingual advocate as well. So if you do have families, Spanish speaking families, I don't do Haitian Creole, unfortunately. But if you have Spanish speaking families that also want to talk about this topic, please send them my way. Because we do help and understand that that's also a need in that population. So just wanted to put that out there.
All right, well, let's take about a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 10:55 and move on to Kelly, who can talk about student-led IEPs. All right, is everyone back with us?
Here.
Yes.
All right. So next we're going to move on and we'll hear from Kelly Minogue. And Kelly is the transition coordinator at Parent Information Center. Kelly, give me 1 second. I'll get your slideshow going.
There we go. Unmute myself. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, there we go. That's better. Okay. I have to get myself down there. All right.
Kelly, you are very quiet at the moment.
I'm very quiet. Well, that's the. I hope you're recording this because no one has ever said that to me in 57 years of my life on this planet.
That's a little bit better.
That's a little bit better. Can everybody hear me okay? Because I normally, my husband is like, really? Do you have to actually, there's like break the sound barrier. I mean, it's crazy because I'm normally really loud, but so you guys can hear me okay now?
We can hear you.
All right. Well, yeah. Well, I'm glad I had a little. I'll make sure I tell him that this evening that I had a soft-spoken moment because people hardly believe it. Okay. So today we're going to talk about student-led IEPs. And as Suzanne very kindly said, I'm Kelly Minogue, and I'm the statewide transition coordinator at Parent Information Center, which I will also call PIC for short because it's just a little easier. And I'm excited to be here today to tell you guys a little bit about this stuff. So if you could go to the next one, please. I keep losing my place too. There we go. Okay. So this event is being co-hosted by Parent Information Center of Delaware, as you know, with these other, lovely people from the other agencies. And these things are just so informative and wonderful when we can have collaborative events like this because we all help each other so much, every day in what we do. So coming together to help present this for parents and students and people who need to hear it is just fantastic. So I'm grateful to have that opportunity today. So about PIC, if you have utilized our services in the past, we'd like to thank you for coming back to join us again today. And if you're new to PIC, we'll take a minute to talk about some of what we do for families in Delaware. So next one, please. So now in our 40th year, if you can believe it, our mission at PIC is to improve health and educational outcomes for children and youth by empowering them, their families, and the professionals who serve them. We do this by providing opportunities like this one, as well as an online video library, fact sheets, information, and learning sessions, and finally through one-on-one consultation with families throughout the state. So please don't hesitate to call us for support at any stage of your child's life. Next, please. So let's start by talking about exactly what an IEP is. By now, you've probably heard the acronym IEP more than a few times. I've probably said it a few times just today. So the question is, what is an IEP? So IEP stands for Individualized Education Program and refers to a written statement that is developed, reviewed, and revised in a meeting that adheres to certain requirements of law and certain regulations. This document is the blueprint for a child's education and is designed by a team that includes both school personnel and the child's parents or legal guardians. The two primary purposes of the IEP are, you might have to click that again. I'm not sure. I think you have an animation there. You may have to click, there we go. So it didn't pop up. Maybe try again. I don't know. There we go. To establish measurable annual goals for the child, and to state the special education related services and supplementary aid that the local educational agency will provide. So next one, please. There we go. Okay. So it's important to remember that an IEP is not only the document that provides the written statement of a child's unique educational program, but it's also the process by which the team meets to monitor progress toward goals and adjust as needed. Any adjustments made should be data-driven and for the benefit of the child. An IEP is a living document and can be changed anytime that the team determines a need for changes to be made. Next, please. Once the team has met and determined that a child is eligible for special education and related services, the school must get written consent from the parent again before it can provide the services to the child that are outlined in the IEP. The IEP is to be developed within 30 days of determining that a child is eligible for special education and related services. And it's not uncommon for the school to request holding these meetings back to back. At a snapshot, the IEP document will include and describe information about the students, their needs, and the data collected to inform decisions. The IEP will also outline specific considerations for the student and describe special education services and supports, as well as how the services will be provided to address the student's unique individual needs. As a refresher, special education means specially designed instruction at no cost to the parent to meet the unique needs of a child with a disability. The IEP is the document that delineates the way a school will meet those needs specifically for that student. The IEP must consider not just what goes on in the classroom, but also a child's participation in extracurricular and non-academic activities as well. Next, please. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, some people call it IDEA, but that always confuses me because IDEA is a word that we use so often, so I call it IDEA for these purposes. So the IDEA governs the rules for IEPs in every state. And in addition, Delaware has its own set of regulations with which the IEP process must comply. Next, please. Okay, so under the IDEA, the IEP must include a thorough analysis of how the student is presently performing in school, so what's going on with them and how they're doing at this moment before that gets put into place. The student's educational goals, so what are they trying to achieve? And how can we make it better? A list of services that the student will receive, including how often and for how long. So that's a very specific definition of what that's going to look like. Transition services for students of transition age. So obviously that applies to the older, usually starting at around 14 or so. Next, please. The other half are on, wouldn't all fit on one without being tiny. So any accommodations, supports, and services needed for the child to be successful in the general education curriculum. Whether the child will participate in the statewide assessment with or without accommodations. And finally, the extent to which an eligible school-age child will be included in the general education environment. So next one, please. So the IEP team should include the student's parent or guardian, the student, if he or she is of transition age, at least one of the child's general education teachers, at least one special education teacher, a specialist who can interpret evaluation results, and a district representative with the authority over special education services. Next, please. Thank you. So transition is a special time for IEP teams. There's a lot to talk about when the child is approaching adulthood, and the team must start considering the services that the child needs to build a bridge into that new world. So who's involved in these transition talks? Transition planning is conducted and goals and services determined by the IEP team. So who are the regular players? And this is the audience participation part. Did anybody watch the last slide? So who are the people who are on that team that we just talked about before? Who are the people, or who's the people that you feel are important? Who should be part of that decision-making team? That could be anybody. Throw out an answer. Anybody wants to tell you anything? No? No participation. Okay.
Yeah, the parent.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Any family members, any other adults that that may be involved in caregiving. The child who has a disability, that he or she must be invited to IEP meetings where the child's post-secondary goals and transition services needed to reach those goals are going to be considered. Teachers, administrators, other school personnel, other support agencies. So the public agency must invite a representative of any participating agency that is likely to be responsible for providing or paying for transition services with parental consent for the child, if the child is of age. Next, please. So again, there's that consent alert that, that there's a critical element to consider when discussing the representatives from other participating agencies, that the parental consent or the child's consent, if he or she has reached the age of majority, is required before the public agency may invite such representatives to attend that IEP meeting. So next, please. So teenagers have a lot to say about nearly everything. Find out what they'd like to say at their IEP meeting. Encourage early participation at even the middle school age, as this gets them accustomed to what goes on at the IEP meeting and can often inspire them to want to take charge of later meetings. After all, these meetings are all about them. There's a saying, nothing about me without me, and I believe it applies in this situation. Your teenager will be an adult before long, and having the confidence and experience to self-advocate will be of great benefit in adulthood. Next, please. The young people have thoughts and dreams about what their future will be like, and we can support them in finding their way there. Their goals are usually the same goals we have for them: to be happy, to be as independent as possible, to live and be included in their community, to have friends and relationships, to work and earn a paycheck, to continue to learn, to be healthy, and to have and make choices about their own lives. Next, please. Encourage your student to discuss their future goals with a trusted adult on their school team. That person should be able to provide advice and encouragement and may offer suggestions where there are perceived or real barriers. Next, please. Remember that every IEP meeting is an opportunity to work on future planning. Helping students to feel confident about contributing to and ultimately leading their own meetings will ensure that their goals are discussed and may be achieved. Early participation encourages familiarity with the process and helps the student understand that his or her input is valuable and essential. Leading the IEP meeting will empower the student to enter the adult world with increased knowledge and confidence. Next, please. So these are some tips for students leading an IEP meeting. This is sort of a guideline of maybe an outline of how that might go, just to give them as a little cheat sheet kind of thing. So introduce yourself and others. So tell them who you are and anybody that you brought with you and what's going on and that this meeting is for you. And then review how you've been doing in school. So, talk about what your experience has been thus far. Request input from the others in the meeting. So the people that are there, whether it's your family, whether it's the people from the school representative, your spec ed coordinator, any teachers who were there, get the input for what they're feeling, their observations, that they want to talk about. Identify your goals for this year. So what do you want to get out of this school year? And, what are you looking to do or change? Identify your after graduation goals. So what do you want post-secondary to look like? Do you want to go to college? Do you want to find some sort of internship? Do you want to find, an apprenticeship? What do you see yourself doing? And talk about that. And identify the supports that you need to be successful. So now that you said, this is what I want to do for this year for school while I'm here, and this is what I see happening next year and the years beyond, after I'm finished with school, this is what I need to help me get there. And that's what they're there for, to listen to those needs and to help you find your way and support you. And then you review those support needs and finalize your program, and that all gets put into the IEP, and then you can conclude the meeting at that point. So it's getting everybody involved and you talking about what it is that you need as that young person, because you're going to be driving that bus. That's it of your life, that you need to be able to say, this is where I want to go, and I'm not sure how to get there, or I think I could get there if I had a little support, or, I'm completely lost. This is what I want to do, but I have no idea, what's going on or what's going to happen, or I'm a little scared, and all students are feeling that way. And students who need extra support like this have that added layer of, concern. And so putting all that together and putting that out there at that meeting, especially when they're driving that meeting, it's such an empowering moment for them to be able to take charge of that. And it's really great, and it leads to really positive outcomes. So next, please. So the role of caregiver is obviously one of great importance, and many people are hesitant to hand over the reins, so to speak, when their young person legally becomes an adult. This transition can be a challenging time for the young person as well. After all, for 18 years, someone else has likely made most of the big decisions about their life. And it's really important at this point to make that transition as smooth as possible. Like any big change, planning ahead is crucial. Start thinking about it a few years in advance. Ask questions. Share your wisdom, but allow them to make decisions for themselves. Don't worry, they'll still need you. And it will be a comfort to them to know that you're there to support and encourage them as they find their way forward. Next one, please. So these are just a couple of resources. The I'm Determined project is a state-directed project funded by the Virginia Department of Education. And their website has fantastic resources. There are videos, articles, planners, etc., designed to help youth and their families through the transition period. And their website is on the slide, but I can put it in the chat if need be as well. And there's another one, please. Advance for me, please. That's it, the Progress Center. So this is another place that has, and that is quite a mouthful. You can see why they went for the acronym of Progress, because that's quite a lot there. And they do a lot of great stuff. And they have also some lovely resources and a lot of great information. And I would recommend having a look through that website as well. I use it a lot, and it's fantastic. So, she wants to circle back to the last slide. Sorry. So so Anya is asking us to circle back. So I'm not sure how far back.
No, just the one previous to the Progress Center one.
Okay. So is it the one for the
Right before this
I'm
one.
Determined?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's just one back from that, Suzanne. So that
This one?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Should let it linger on there a bit longer to if that website. And I can also, if you were just looking for that, I could should have put those links in the chat. That would have been easier just to click on for you. So okay, all righty. So let's see. So back to where did we go? Now I lost my page. All right. So if we scroll forward back to the one with the pick locations on it, please. There we go. So I didn't do, I feel like the last person I didn't do a page with just my contact details on it, but everybody, all of our offices are on this one. So for more information about transition and all the other things that we do at PIC, so because transition is a huge topic, so we have many resources available on our website. We offer training and webinars. I present a regular Lunch and Learn series on a variety of topics related to transition. I'm currently hosting a 3-part series on IEPs. So, and this student-led IEPs is part of it, actually. So you can check out our website or our social media pages for how to register for any upcoming events that we have. And we'd absolutely love to have you come to those and talk some more about those. They tend to be a smaller, sort of more intimate setting, you know, with a handful of attendees. And the Lunch and Learn series, it's always on Thursdays from 12 to 1. So it's the, you know, literally lunch and learn time frame. And it seems to work for a lot of people, you know, at that time frame. So it's really good. And you'll enjoy getting that information out there. And so, you know, please remember Parent Information Center is here to help. You know, I am the transition coordinator, you know, with sort of ages 14 to 26, but we help through all stages of a child's life, and, you know, prenatal, you know, helping mamas, you know, right on through to age 26. And so there are people who are specialists in each of those areas. And we have a whole wonderful team of over 20 people that do a lot of great work. And our parent consultants are there to help. And, you know, with whatever stage that your child is at in the process. And here's the ways that you can reach us. These are our 4 offices throughout the state. And you can check out our website or on our social media. I think there's one more, Suzanne. A little thank you one, yes. So just to say thank you, you know, for coming today, and thank you to our partnerships for putting us together with all this. As I said, it's fantastic with this collaboration like this, because we all kind of come at it from a different angle, and we support each other and support all the families. And it's fantastic to have these great resources of these ladies who have spoken before me today. And so I really appreciate their input. And as I said, I meant what I said when I said we support their work all the time. We reach out to them on the regular, because there is always, more that can be done. And with us, with the educational and medical support or whatever, there are often questions that I don't know the answer to. And I reach out to these, wonderful women and lots of other people that I've met who do know the answers. And it's a network. And as somebody said earlier, it takes a village, and it really does. It really does. And, we're all here working together, to support you any way that we can. And, and please reach out, and I'll put my email and contact information in the chat as well. Which I should have put on the slide, and I apologize, but I will do that. You can reach out to me, and reach out to Pick, like I said, with any questions that you have about any stage of your child's life. And I just want to thank you again for coming, and thanks for inviting me to be part of it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kelly. I have a quick question.
There you go.
Sure.
Sorry, I didn't realize
No,
somebody.
go for it.
I didn't mean to cut anybody off. I apologize.
You did not. You're fine.
My quick question for you is, as far as IEP services are concerned, does PIC happen to have a resource regarding like IEP advocate, someone who can actually, or even the resource where, I know it was a very big challenge, with taking over and making sure that, the correct things were in his IEP. So as a parent,
Right.
you don't really know, too much as far as what's required. I'm one who, I'm a stickler for details. So I'll take 50,000 notes,
Right.
just to make sure I'm retaining the information. But someone who can actually advocate for the IEP and say, hey, I think this may need to be modified, or, even leading you down the the correct path to make sure that everything that needs to be in that child's IEP is actually there and is being fulfilled.
Right. And yes, there are guidelines, there are printed materials that are guidelines, and there are, we as parent consultants, myself included, we attend, we can go to an IEP meeting with you. We can meet with you, we can talk about some things. Again, obviously I'm not an attorney, so I can't legally advise you like what to do, in specific case, or this is what you should do kind of thing. But sort of defining like options that are available, and like a basic guideline and things like that. And there's all kind of little worksheets even of like what to ask for in your IEP, and we have some resources like that are on the website, and some that are not yet that I just have that I'd be happy to share with you too. And as I said, talking to one of our parent consultants, at whatever point the age is for the child, whether it's the first IEP that they've had because they've just had gotten a diagnosis and they say, hey, I need to do this, or they're just starting school, right the way through to the end when they're transitioning into adulthood, is that, having those reviews and saying, okay, there are some things, this has been good, but there's something else that I want to do, or, hey, that's not working for us anymore. I mean, it's a living, breathing thing. It constantly changes. And so there are basic guidelines for how it should look. Like it has a basic format. And we actually have a resource about that too, like sort of showing you what an IEP should look like for a person who's never seen one before, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, there definitely are people who can help you with that. There's resources like little like fact sheets, little tips on how to do some things like that. And, as I said, again, meeting with us, we do a lot of virtual meeting, linking up with people and chatting in like Teams or Zoom to have a meeting, or sometimes an in-person meeting if that's better for some people. After COVID, it seems like nobody wants to know me. It's always on the virtual. So, and I'm good with that. It's whatever works, but it's, and including attending, a meeting at the school. If you just feel like you want to have that a support person there with you, you absolutely are entitled to bring anybody you want. And that could be one of our parent consultants, to come to the meeting with you or whatever. And not so much to drive the meeting because it's your meeting and it's your child's meeting, but to, maybe give some hints about something or remind you of something that we talked about that you might want to ask them about for the IEP team, that kind of thing. Was that answering your question?
It does. I appreciate it because like I said, I'm one who, like, I've been doing this for some time now. Like
Right.
I said, it's about to be 18. But I
Mhm.
know that there are challenges because sometimes you feel like as a parent, like IEPs are a lot of, it's a lot. And it's for anybody. It's a lot. So to get to the point where, there have been times where, I felt like, and I will speak up, and say,
And you
hey,
should.
I don't understand, as
And you
opposed
should.
to, you have some parents who feel like, it's an intimidating process, but because you're doing it for the sake of your child, you're going to do what you have to do. So it was just more so, especially because I apologize, especially because he's about to be 18 and that transition. I apologize, my notifications are going off. Sorry. With him, that has been discussed because we just recently had an IEP meeting and, he has made it clear like, hey, I want mom to still be available,
Right.
when it comes to this meeting, but I'm at a place where I want him to gain his independency. So even him knowing,
Absolutely.
hey, I have an advocate who, will break down some of these things to me and,
Yeah.
just having that in-person support for him would be beneficial. So you
Absolutely.
definitely answer questions. I will be utilizing the resources. Tika, I appreciate it. I did see in the chat where you left your Gmail as an educator, and I will be taking that information.
No,
And this is
absolutely do. And
where,
there's even a link in when you like when you write to me, like if you send me an email at that, whatever, and I write back to you, there's even a link in my signature block that you can just click on. It's like a little hyperlink that you can schedule a virtual meeting. It takes you right into my Outlook calendar, so it knows when I have free time, and we can, schedule a meeting to talk about it further if you'd like to. To have a discussion about some things and kind of see where we are and where, and what ways that we could support you. I mean, absolutely, do that. Definitely reach out and we can have a chat about some things.
thank you so much.
No, you're very welcome. I'm so glad you came.
Have been doing such an amazing job. And these are resources that, not too many people are aware of. So all of you guys, Lauren, Kelly, Jess, like all of you guys have been doing an amazing job. And I thank you guys for putting this opportunity together, for all of us, because it's really needed. Like I said, he's about to be 18 and I still need help, so for anybody else, but just to have that information and those resources, it alleviates some of the stressors on top of what's going on in life for all of us.
It is, absolutely. And you said something in when you were just talking a minute ago about how him, being there and still wanting you to be there. That is something that might just be a little small detail that you just kind of rolled out in the middle of your conversation there, but that's actually a huge thing because that says to me two things. It says that he's aware and he's onto it and he's saying, okay, I gotta be taking this over because I'm almost grown here. But so he's aware of that part, but also that he wants you to be there because that says to me that he knows that you always have been there. And he still wants that support from you. And of course he does, and that's wonderful, and still wants you to be involved, and you still can be, it's like, even though he legally becomes 18, he still wants your support, and he'll always have it, no matter how old he is and how old you are. It's just, that's how parenting works for most of us. But I think that's fantastic that he's already looking at that and thinking about that, and that and to the point even that he wants to include you and wants you to still be there to support him. I think that's wonderful, and that's great. That's a compliment to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Kelly, where on the website are the Lunch and Learn webinars and the format and the fact sheets? I pulled up the website, but I didn't see under events. I didn't see Lunch and Learn.
Right now.
I saw.
Usually, a lot of times on our Facebook page is where I know that there's a lot of the postings in the social media where we go, where it lists what the upcoming events are. That's generally where I tell people to go, to be honest, for that one, for the social media on the Facebook page, because we usually have like this event was advertised there, and my Lunch and Learns are there, and there's a whole lot of other events that that my colleagues put on for, obviously sometimes they're a very specific thing, whether it's about people with hearing loss, deaf children. There's some of those that are specific to that, some that are specific to children just starting school, and then there's the transition events and things like that. But I think the Facebook one may be the best one to sort of scroll through and see what's there for that.
What about the
I'm sorry, go
fact
ahead.
sheet? I'm sorry, the fact sheets,
Right,
because I'm looking under resources and it's just early intervention services.
so
if
it's still
you
not there,
click-
okay, all right.
If you click on the word resources, you don't scroll down to the early intervention, just click on the word resources. It should take you to the fact sheet page.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
I know a lot of people get confused with that.
I was like, I was trying to think to see, visualize it in my head. I'm like, I know there's something you click on, but I had to think.
Yeah, now there's a lot of them there. So yeah, okay,
yeah.
that was what I was doing. I was just clicking and the drop down box just said early intervention. Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Great. Right.
All right. Any other questions before we move on? And I'll just follow that up, but we also have, if PIC has a YouTube page, and up on the YouTube page, there are a lot of videos and trainings that we've done in the past. You can kind of click through our website. There's all kinds of resources and other websites and videos and trainings, things like that. And then as Kelly said, monitor our Facebook page for upcoming events. We also have a calendar on the website. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on to our panel discussion. I'm still missing 2 panelists that look like they're running a little bit late. I just reached out to both by email, so hopefully they will join us, but I don't want to hold everyone else up. So at the moment, we have two of us that were planning to speak on the panel. I am here, and I was planning to speak as a parent who has now 4 children who are of transition age and who are working on transitioning in various stages. So my oldest is 24 and is living independently. She lives with a physical disability. She lives with a hypermobility disorder and also with osteogenesis imperfecta. Then my second child is my son. Oh, it looks like maybe one of our other panelists just joined. Latoya, is that you? Okay, let me rename her and I'll let her introduce herself in just a second. So then my second child is my son, who was diagnosed with autism when he was just under a year old. And you're actually going to learn a lot more about him because he's going to speak today. And I'll let him tell his story. I love his story. And you can also Google him and see his TED Talk that I'm going to plug shamelessly as mom. Then my third child has another hypermobility disorder. She's a rare disorder, rare disease fighter. We call them zebras, and also struggles with ADHD and anxiety and all those things that go with it. And then my youngest has autism and epilepsy and several other comorbid disorders. And so our house has always been very interesting. And so, as I said, my oldest is 24. My youngest is getting ready to turn 14. So I have one that's out and completely independent, one that just graduated college and is at home waiting for the next kind of stage of life as he looks for jobs. And then my third child will be going to college in August. So we're preparing to be down to just the baby living at home. And she's 14, so she's getting ready to start high school. So we just had her first transition meeting recently. That's me. Latoya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Latoya. Let me turn my camera on for a minute. I'm driving, but my name is Latoya Chandler. I'm a mom. I live in the Delaware area, Dover, Delaware, and I'm mom to a brilliant little boy, very creative, animated, rebellious at times, but just a wonderful little kid. And he also happens to have medical and educationally diagnosed with autism. He was diagnosed at, I believe, 4 years old, going on 5. And we thought it may have been like a speech delay type of thing, but kind of manifested across the board for him in other social, ways, and then later on in learning. But it's been a journey, and I'm not sure how far you wanted me to go into my introduction, but that's what I want to say so far, just to give you a little background on me. I'm newer to parent and family advocacy, but I'm very excited about it because I see how much it's impacted and helped my life in IEP meetings and just consults and talking to other moms and being on these family leadership meetings, it's just definitely been really empowering. And also just I've learned so much. So I'm glad to be here and meet everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, Latoya. And then here's the, take a second and introduce yourself, give your background.
Oh, there we go. Hi, I'm the aforementioned son of Suzanne. I have several different learning disabilities and various disabilities that I've dealt with all throughout my life. I recently graduated from Belmont Abbey College about a month ago with my undergrad degree in sport management with a minor in psychology. What else are they looking for, Mom? Anything else about me?
So tell them just a little bit about how you got to Belmont and some of the things that some of the credentials that are on your resume.
Yeah, so getting to Belmont, I was definitely a labor of love throughout elementary, middle, and high school. With the various disabilities that I have, there were always people telling me what was possible and what wasn't. And for the longest time, a degree of any kind outside of a trade school was kind of deemed impossible for myself. But through the work of my parents and my siblings and myself and all the people that advocated for me and helped me work through those disabilities through my life, we were able to get me through high school with an above average GPA and test scores and into the college that I wanted to go to most. And then, along the way, I've gotten to work with individuals like the Billie Jean King Foundation, the Special Olympics. I was a unified coach at one of their events a couple of years ago. What else is there? Those are the two big ones that I like to highlight. There's several others along the way. But yeah, that's pretty much me.
And I love when he glosses over the fact that he won an ESPY award. But I'll make him tell you more about that later. Okay, so for Latoya and Harrison, and I'll answer this myself, what has been the biggest challenge as you plan for, as you work through transition?
For me, some of the biggest challenges have been
Latoya, you're breaking up on us.
Oh man, I'm sorry. Okay. So can you hear me a little bit better now?
Yep, much better.
When it comes to the educational system, the biggest kind of challenge with transition has been, I guess, for the team, getting everyone on the same page to see things in a way that is just continuously going to continue. Like, for example, my son's ability to succeed. And I'll give a brief example. This year, in particular, my son is moving from his school where he started at for a Class C setting to moving into a B setting. He's moving out of that school to his home school, and getting the cooperation of the team to make that transition as smooth as possible. So one of the challenges was, in particular, making his learning plan, his IEP plan, really, really individualized, really catered to him, highlighting the things that are working, supported by the data that they're taking, throughout the year. And I was asking for that information to be highlighted, to be kind of narrowed down to exactly what's working for him, so that going forward, the staff that was going to receive him is going to have a little bit more to work with. And also Caleb can kind of continue without with less regression, because we know that there's some regression. It comes to children changing. We expect there'll be a period of transition where the learning might be, go to the wayside for a moment as a child adapts. But the team was a little bit resistant to that, to the work that might take, or the importance. Why was that important? So for me, it was just trying to get the point across to get them to see that this benefited Caleb, and that's really what mattered. And also just trying to understand and highlight exactly what is working now for him. What are the tools we're using? What are the accommodations that we're using that are successful? So, you know, and that includes understanding his learning style. Those have been some of the challenges, you know, in particular for the educational part.
Harrison, you want to share?
Yeah, I was just about to say, I think a lot of what I have to say is very similar to what LaToya just said. And it's, you know, the biggest challenge is always kind of overcoming the generalized nature of our educational system today. You know, everything is based so much around a classroom and not the individual, that when you have somebody that isn't exactly like the 25 other kids in the class, you know, they're the one that's kind of thrown to the wayside and just told to either figure it out yourself, or, you know, we'll do something less for them to match their level instead of doing something more for them to pull them to the level that they could be at. I think that was, for me, in my, you know, in middle school and high school primarily, it was always, what can we do to come, I don't want to say come down to his level, but it was almost like, you know, what can we do to come down to his level instead of what can we do to bring him up to a higher level and bring him to his full potential. I think that's, you know, I see LaToya nodding her head. I think that's something that all of us kind of see and understand is the way that it works for people with disabilities. Or I always hate saying disability because I feel like I'm saying the wrong word, but that's just what they've always said to me. So if anybody knows the more gifted, yeah, you know, the better terminology, please let me know. But you guys understand what I'm saying. I think that is by far the biggest hurdle to overcome when transitioning through schooling as a gifted individual is, you know, just overcoming that generalized nature and making it an environment where a student who isn't the exact same as 25 other students can exceed or excel.
And if I could add to that, I think with Harrison, you know, when we were transitioning with Harrison, we had gone until he was in, I mean, it was high school before we really started to talk about college, because we just kept being told he can't, he won't, he's not able to. And honestly, I think we all bought into that too. Even Harrison to a certain point, he just hadn't really envisioned anything other than, I'm going to live at home forever and I'm going to try and do something with my hands because that's all I'm capable of doing. And there were a couple people early in his high school career that recognized things in him and said, you know, is that what you really, really want? And it wasn't at all. And so then it was, well, how can we make this happen for him? And the difference between freshman year of high school and senior year of high school was just unbelievable when people started to encourage him and tell him that things were possible, and really listen to him and his opinions and his ideas, and what he wanted to do with his life. And so one of his special education coordinators who had him for a few years in high school, she was telling me the story. She said when she first met him, he would always bring another student with him to her office. So if he needed anything, he would bring another student who would be the one to speak for him. And they would walk into the office and, you know, his friend, whoever it was, would say, oh, you know, Harrison needs this. And then by like midway through senior year, she said, all of a sudden, Harrison's just appearing in my office with questions or, you know, needing stuff. And he didn't need to bring a translator anymore. And so that was really big, just talking about what we went through with him. But then we got to, okay, well, if he's going to go to college and he really wants to go far away, which did not seem like a great idea to us, but that's what he wanted. So we had to kind of let go of some things that we had thought of, and figure out a way to make that work for him. And for us, the way that the kind of the rule that I put on that is if you're going that far away, you need a built-in support system. So in our house, what worked is I said, okay, Harrison, you love sports. If you want to go to college and live away from home, you're going to go as an athlete because I know that there's built-in supports for student athletes. And that's what worked for Harrison. With my oldest, we sent her to the University of Delaware thinking, well, she's close to home, so she'll succeed. And it took a year for her to she didn't want to be there anymore. And she left and she never went back to college. And she's living independently. We've helped her figure things out. But just the difference in kind of the amount of supports I had when we had Kaylee getting ready to go to college or looking for that transition plan and Harrison were huge. And I think finding those resources are important, because I know so much more now with my third child going to college than I did when we sent Harrison to college. So for us, the biggest challenge was just knowing what was possible and figuring out how to support that. And we have a question in the chat. Harrison, what are some things you looked for when deciding the best college fit for you?
I was actually just about to bring that up to you because that's a great question. I think, one of the big things is for me was try not to get caught up in the glam of, these big schools. I think when you think of college, you always think of these big D1 schools, state schools, and, all the resources and the fun that can be had there, but don't overlook some of these smaller colleges that you've never heard of. When I started doing my looking for schools and when me and mom started figuring out where I wanted to go, the place I ended up going was never actually on the list because we never knew that it existed. So I'd say the biggest thing for me is don't overlook the small schools, and don't overlook the benefit of a small school, a small classroom, a closed environment, but also, try to compile a list of maybe the top 5 things that you or the person that you're advocating for is looking for in their education. Whether it be athletics or it be a certain major or minor, or, anything in that general area that you can get directly from the school. Try to make a list of a couple things that are most important to you. And when you find certain schools that have those things and you go on tours, look and just see how you feel in the environment. I know my case was a little bit special because I when I stepped on campus and when I got my offer letter to be on the cycling team for the school I went to, that was it for me. I was happy. I love the environment. I knew that's where I wanted to be. But now when I'm going through schools with my younger sister, I'm seeing some other parts that I may have overlooked, like, what are the professors like, or what do students who went to that school saying about their dining or their classroom experience or their out of classroom experience. So I guess the short answer for everything I'm saying is just, do as much research as you can on all of the schools that you find and all of the little things that you're looking for in your educational journey. And just getting lost here. And just try to keep mind of your goals. Don't let big things like having fun or a certain price point, dictate you too much, and just keep in mind that what your goals are and what you're trying to get out of that education.
And I'm going to butcher your name, but Ms. Garrett has raised her hand. Did you want to ask a question? And then Tika, I see you.
It's Anya, Suzanne. Thank
Anya,
you
thank
for the
you.
respect.
I want to butcher it.
Thank you. So Harrison, I actually do have like a 2-part question for you, because I do have Jaden here with me. And my question is for you, when you were in high school, like what were your thoughts on, furthering your education? How did that make you feel with, hey, once I get out of high school, what am I going to do? And then what was what were your challenges? And then what was the turning point for you to determine, hey, I know I can go to school and further my education?
Yeah. So for the first part of that, my general thoughts, I mean, it changes a lot from freshman year to senior year. I remember starting high school and, like my mom said, it wasn't even on the radar. It wasn't something that we viewed at all possible. And I was going to go to trade school and become a mechanic and live either at my parents' house or near my parents' house forever. And that was just going to be me. So for the first couple of years, it was definitely just not an option. It wasn't even something that I really thought about. It got so far into my head that I couldn't go that I was like, I just don't even want to try. And then probably about halfway through sophomore year to the beginning of junior year, the people around me started to change and the thought process started to change. And, it kind of became more of like, maybe this is possible. Let's start looking just in case. It was kind of a fast transition for us because, within 3 years, really, it went from this isn't possible at all to maybe to, all right, we're doing this and I'm going 8 hours from home let's figure this out right now. And I've already forgot the second part of your question. My ADHD is going crazy. But for the first part, it was, it was never possible. And then all of a sudden it was. And, it was, luckily I had my parents who were super supportive. And once I made the decision that I was like, wait a minute, I do want to go, and we only have a year and a half left to figure it out, they were like, okay, we're going to lock in, and we're going to find you a bunch of choices, and we're going to help you get scholarships and figure out what we can afford and what will be best for you. So that was, I hope that takes care of the first part, and I'm going to have to ask you to ask the second part again.
Let me add something real quick before she does that. There were days, let me also say that there were days that it was a kicking and screaming situation. And for us, one of the biggest things with all 4 of our kids has been, tell me what you want to do, and I'm going to keep pushing in that direction until you can't just look at me and say, I'm done, I quit. If you suddenly decide you want to do something else, we need to have an in-depth discussion to learn if you just want to do something else because this has gotten too hard, or if you really want to do something else with your life. And so from the time that he said, no, I want to go to college, and the original dream was I want to be an occupational therapist and help kids like me. When that was the dream, we kind of talked it through as a family and said, if this is the direction we're going, this is where we're going. And it was. And then there were days that it was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And we really had to stop and say, okay, but Harrison, are you just tired? Are you just, burnt out? Or do you really want to do something different? And that it's hard as a parent to know where that line is, and to know where the line between this is what I want for you and this is what I want to support you in achieving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, you're fine. Like I'm receiving all of this. Okay. I'm receiving all of this. Because like I said, Jaden is at a place where, like Harrison, like he's going to the 11th grade. So he's at a place where when he originally started, I want to, be an animator. I want to create animations, and with the school that he was in, going down that career path in school, and, you have to take up different art classes and things like that. And it got to a point where it's like, okay, no, I don't care about school. Like, I don't even want to go, to college. I won't be able to afford it. And like you said, Suzanne, like I'm one of those parents where giving up and not doing anything at all is not an option. Like Jaden, will change his mind several times, which is understandable and is to be expected. But just to hear your story, Harrison, on how things were for you, and that's all of us, honestly, when it came to school, you really didn't know what it was that you wanted to do. You had your dreams and things like that. And then it changes, which is fine. But just for you to share your story, I truly appreciate it. You definitely answered the first part of my question. The second part of the question was just, when did that switch come about for you? Like, okay, this is what I want to do and I'm going to do it. Like, what did that look like for you?
I'm glad that I answered the first part, and I love sharing my story, so I'm glad that you guys are taking something from it and it's helping you guys. That's awesome to hear, so I'm really glad about that. But yeah, the switch, I probably, like I said, it was about halfway through sophomore year, beginning of junior year, somewhere in there, and it was just kind of a quick, like, wait a minute, this might be possible. Is the people around me really kind of telling me that, if that was something I wanted to do, it was possible. And I think the big switch came not from the people in my house, because, mom and dad had been telling me, if you want to do it, we'll do it for forever. But it's, my mom and my dad. So I'm like, well, whatever. They don't know what they're talking about. They're crazy. But then, people at school, and I had teachers who were really, impressed with what I could do in the classroom, and suggested that I should go to college, and those were the individuals that changed my mindset completely. Because, it's one thing when you hear it from your parents or from your friends, but, when somebody like a teacher, at least for me, when my teachers were coming to me and saying, why aren't you applying to colleges? Why don't you want to go? In a very confused way, when they asked that question, it really did open my mind up more and say, this is entirely possible, and I should probably pursue this, because I feel like I'd always in the back of my mind had wanted to go. It was always something that was seemed like a lot of fun and something that I would always love to do. Growing up, I was just told I couldn't, and when I finally was told by somebody that I could. It was just kind of all hands on deck. Let's go. Let's do this. So I think the big thing, you know, if you're looking to get into a headspace and convince somebody that they can, is get people like educators and like their teachers and faculty members of the school to say, hey, if you want to do this, we can absolutely do this. You know, I don't know why you think it's not possible, but it you know, it 100% is.
And if I could add to that, there was one other big transition for him. And that was around 7th grade, I think. So what we found for him is that when he found his passion, and his passion was cycling, when he found that, his entire life changed. So, you know, he had done all kinds of things as a kid. He loved sports. Harrison's always loved sports. He has a degree in sports, for goodness sake. But, you know, sports were always a challenge because he was not exactly a team player at all. So, you know, he played football, he played baseball, he played all these sports, and they just weren't the right fit for him, but he really loved sports. So we just kept trying. And his occupational therapist actually said he couldn't ride a bike at first because he couldn't cross midline. And so riding a bike was really hard for him. And his occupational therapist, who is probably the most important person in his life because she changed so much for him, said, no, get him to ride a bike. And when he learned to ride a bike, and then when he found competitive cycling, it became his entire passion, you know, that hyperfixation that people with autism tend to have. And so we kind of let him go with that and pushed it to be that driving force in his life. So it gave him something to focus on. And school got better. Home life got better, attitude got better. He's, you know, it wasn't perfect. We still had all the challenges, but everything just got better because he had one thing in his life that he loved and where he could just go and be who he was, and no one really cared that he had autism or any of the other disabilities they had. So finding that passion, I think, is really important for any kid. Let me go to chat. Latoya, yeah, jump in at any point, Latoya. Let me go back.
Yeah, I was just agreeing with the comments that were being made.
Okay.
I see that with my son at a young age, at even 9, that social proof kind of reinforces what they think they want, and also kind of what we kind of guide them on. So like Harrison was saying, his professors who were making him kind of speaking life and showing him that, hey, what you want to do is very possible. You know, if this is something that you want to do, here's the pathway. When it becomes more clear to children, and you know, as they grow up to be teenagers, I'm just seeing this at an earlier stage, that the support and reinforcement of what I'm saying by, you know, maybe his aunt and uncle or other people that he looks up to is helpful, very, very helpful. So thank you for sharing your story. I was really intrigued by it.
I'm going to go back to Cynthia. It looks like you have a couple questions. Do you want to go ahead and ask those? I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're asking.
My apologies. I'm new to
No
Delaware.
problem.
Hello, everybody. I just wanted to know if there were any elementary schools in the Newark, Newcastle area that are really good with dealing with children between the age of 9 and 13 or 9 and 15 that have IEPs that will push them forward instead of just trying to keep them at a lower level or what they think the child is at.
So I'm going to answer this sort of, and you'll understand my sort of in a minute. Anyone else, feel free to jump in as well. So my answer to that is that most Delaware schools can be amazing at working with kids who have IEPs. We have some wonderful schools, we have some wonderful programs, we have some wonderful educators and educational professionals working in our schools. That said, here's my sort of. I think that in a lot of situations, it very much depends on the child and the particular set of educators that are working with that child in a given year. And, you know, that's where PIC and other organizations can come in really handy and helpful, is to help you as a parent to ensure that their needs are met, and that they're doing a good job of working with your child who has an IEP. I don't know that I could fairly say this school is better than that school, because we get calls from some parents who say, you know, oh, my school's amazing, I don't have a problem with my school at all, they're doing wonderful. And then, you know, the next day I'll get a call from another parent in the same school who's saying the exact opposite, like, my school's making me crazy. So I don't know that I would have a fair answer to that, other than just to say that wherever, you know, you put your child, it's all about how you advocate, how you support, how you hold them accountable. And, you know, with my four, I joke that we've had them in every school district in Sussex County at one point or another, because it's been and that's what I love about Delaware choice law, is for us, it's always been finding the right fit for the right kid at the right moment. And that has meant very different schools all along the way. And now we've moved on to Kent County, and my youngest two has spent the last 2 years was at a charter school in Kent County. So that's kind of my thought on that. Tika, I'm going to put you on the spot and you can tell me no, but I know you work in that area. So do you have any thoughts for that question?
I do have some thoughts. I think, and I tell parents this all the time, that honestly, and especially since the pandemic, the biggest determining factor is you and your participation and engagement, because similar to what Suzanne was just mentioning, that it can vary building by building, district by district, and even team by team. And so my son is 12 and has been receiving services since he is 3. And we've been in one district, but we've had a roller coaster experience. And even most recently this year, he started middle school, and the beginning of our 6th grade year was extremely rough. In fact, my son didn't even start school till about 17 days after the rest of the student population, because they were not willing to follow his IEP with fidelity as I intended it for it to be. And so it took several conversations, mama advocacy, and a bunch of things. And I can say we're wrapping up the end of the school year is a complete 160, complete 180, and that we're, you know, in a much better place. They are following his IEP with fidelity. They have also formed, you know, a better relationship with myself, in the sense that they were open to when I had suggested, so my son has autism, and he is in what we would call a B setting. So he spends about, well, I guess it's a little over 60% of his time with his typical peers, but he has 2 separate pull-out small group sessions. And his case manager was not familiar with students with autism. However, he may think he was, but there were a lot of things specific to individuals with autism that they were doing that was not setting my son up for success. For instance, they changed the location of one of his classrooms and never prepared him for that, never even informed him until it happened, and then he would refuse to go to class. And so I brought in the statewide Office of Autism program, and they worked collaboratively. And the thing with the office is, even though I reached out to them, they cannot initiate or like a partnership with the school without the school kind of like the parent can't initiate that for the school. But because, like I said, we had worked on this relationship, they were now in a place where they then reached out, and they then gave me the feedback that that was so great that they've actually asked her to come back next year and do even more training for other staff. And so it's really great to see how, you know, when you're advocating just for your individual child, you're able to affect some systemic issues that can affect the other kids. So I know I got a little sidetracked. So back to your point about the question. I also work in the school system, and I've worked in 3 Newcastle County districts. And I will say, of those 3, I think that Red Clay and Brandywine do a better job of working with students with IEPs than the Christina district. And I think a part of that has to do with some of the work that their directors have done. And so not to say that Christina has never been in that place or can't get back to it, but they have gone through a lot of change in directors. They went through, I believe it was 4 directors in 5 years. And so they're just really kind of rebranding themselves completely as a district anyway. But it's not to say that you couldn't have a good experience in one of their schools. But again, just always staying at the forefront of that. Sorry, I took so long, Suzanne.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Anya?
I actually just wanted to piggyback off of you, Suzanne and Tika, to answer your question, Cynthia. Both of my children are gifted, and one is just turned 12, and the other one is 17. I know that was a very big challenge in knowing what was the right fit, for each particular child. I know with Jaden, like I kept him back in the 1st grade because he had an issue with developmental delay. And at that time, I knew nothing about, the resources and tools that were out there and available. Of course, we as the parents are our child's biggest advocate. Nobody knows what our child needs except for, us until they become of age where they understand and know what they need themselves. And even as a parent, having those rights by law, by Delaware law, that's one thing I had a few challenges when it came to, team meetings in regards to IEPs. And unfortunately, you do have some schools where it's like I was saying earlier, you kind of feel like you're being taken advantage of, especially when you don't have the information. So you're kind of giving someone else the reins rather than having full control over that situation. But because you have rights, it's more so you being that child, your child's best advocate, and just seeing what works for them. If you see that, I'm a big stickler for communication. I'm one who, talk to me, I talk back. So just having those tools and resources available to you. Autism Delaware was a really good resource for us, especially when it came to the IEP aspect, and knowing what should be in the IEP, really understanding those laws and regulations that were available, because and then now that the kids are back in school, it creates a even bigger challenge because they were out of school for so long because of COVID, and now going back into the schools and just, getting everybody back on track becomes a very big challenge. So it's really what you make of it, and that they see that, you're really advocating for your child and what they need. And there are there are so many resources, even to come on here today and get even more resources that I had no clue, were out there. It's just really getting connected to those right avenues that fit for you and your family. And everything else will come along. Like Tika said, and not only are you advocating for your child, you could be advocating for someone else's child. I know that was a very big challenge with one of the schools that my youngest was going to, and it was a charter school, where, they kind of dropped the ball. So I'm one for documentation as well. Document, go into those meetings, taking your notes, put a binder together, get an advocate that can actually sit in the meeting with you, and your son or daughter, who will be able to, you have that continued support and you don't feel like you're by yourself, because IEPs are a lot and they will burn you out, even to the point, God bless you, Suzanne, you got 4, so kudos, I commend you. But Cynthia, it's more so just being that advocate and getting connected to those resources that best fit you and your family. And it's trial and error, honestly. Like, Suzanne said, and Tika said, some schools are better than others, but it also depends on the need of the child when it comes to that. So just getting connected and looking for those resources. Welcome to Delaware. I'll even drop my email in the chat, so if you even need some of that guidance, because it's a learning process. for everyone. And it changes daily, not just yearly, but daily, where you have those rights to recall. Even if you had an IEP meeting, I can call another meeting because I'm seeing, something has changed. So just knowing those things, and having those resources and tools available to you. So that's all I wanted to say. And I'm gonna put my email in the chat, just to be of service. Not yay.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And then Tika had asked a question, Harrison, about Gear Up. I'm going back to look for it. Or Tika, you can ask him directly. I know I saw it.
I was just curious if through his program, since cycling had been such a benefit for him, if he had or if he does teach other kids how to bike ride. I know the Down Syndrome Society sometimes brings in a program called I Can Bike that we've participated in the past. It's just a week long, which I think that's why for us it wasn't as effective. But anyway, so I was just curious.
And I Can Bike, before you start, I Can Bike is coming back this year. It's the last week in July. I just saw that yesterday. Go ahead, Harrison.
So yeah, we do. We have been kind of on a bit of a hiatus over the last couple of years, just while I was at school. Gear Up got put a little bit on the back burner. But no, that was kind of what we all started Gear Up with, was teaching children with exceptionalities how to ride bikes, and trying to promote smaller sports that not many people have heard of before, to kind of give people an opportunity to find their niche. So yeah, we absolutely do provide services like that. If you want, you can go to our website and reach out to the email on there, and we could get you started with something like that. Like I said, we've been on a bit of a hiatus, just with me going through school and graduating, but we would love to get started back up. So if you wanted to reach out, you could absolutely do that, and we could kind of help get you started on that.
Thank you. I'll check out the website.
I am
Awesome.
putting that in the chat. I accidentally just sent it to Lauren directly, but I'm going to put it in the chat. Any other questions? As I make sure I put the right email or the right website in there. Yep, I got it. Okay. Any other questions for the panel? And I kind of love that this has become more than just a couple of us on the panel. It's become a group discussion.
I'll just add my thoughts there and kind of go along with everyone else. When you move into it, whether it's a new school district or what have you, I just find that it's just invaluable, just your team, like having your team, if that means one other person, it makes a difference. I have a team, and then I have a backup person and another backup person that I try to let know when I think I'm going to have an IEP meeting. So they get an idea of what it's about, and then they can kind of plan their schedules according to that. Whoever can support me, it makes a difference to have a team. And because showing up to the meeting sometimes, or you can't think of everything, not all in one setting at times. And I found that with myself, when I try to think of everything and get my thoughts across, what I felt like I was receiving from the team wasn't support. And so then that triggered an emotional response in me. And I'm like, no, I'm just his, representative right now. Trying to turn off the feelings behind parenting. So it was helpful to me to have, for example, Miss Mary Andrews was the advocate for me in the last meeting that I had just recently. And she was able to, I definitely felt supported. She was able to back me up because she understood what the goals were for the IEP meeting. She reiterated them when it seemed like those were kind of being pushed to the side, to turn it into something else. And it's not that it seems like sometimes it's us against the school system. It's really not, but what there tends to be is this little dissonance about everybody's agenda. So what was helpful having an advocate is she kept putting the agenda, the reason for the meeting, in front of everything, and the goals in front of everything, versus, oh, we can't do this, or, misunderstandings. And that was very, very key. And I thought it was a success, to whatever extent that we were able to make it, come to an agreement at the meeting. I thought it was a success because of the way the meeting was held, and the way that, my voice was heard. And then, I felt like it was a win for my son. So that's just one thing I want to add.
Thank you. A couple things I want to add before we, finish up. So I think for us in our house, one of the biggest things that I would recommend from our experience is, if you are looking at that college route, make sure you know what opportunities are out there. There are a lot of schools now that are offering these really great programs for children who might not otherwise be comfortable or be have a good experience going to college. University of Delaware has the Spectrum Scholars Program. There's a great program out of Clemson. A good friend of ours that lives, she lives further down south. Her daughter is profoundly autistic and has a syndrome that I can't for life me remember the name of right now. And so she really struggles with a lot of activities of daily living. But she is in a bridge program this year, and next year will go to Clemson University through this program that she's a part of. And watching her kind of go through that has been really, really cool, because I didn't know that existed. And so just seeing what they've done for Kelsey has been awesome. For us, when we were picking schools, my third child, Shelby, she'll be starting college in August. When we were trying to figure out where she was going, there was a lot of question marks we had, because we've struggled most of her life trying to figure out what was wrong, because there was all these problems. Nobody could kind of tell us what it was. So she didn't get her diagnosis until this past year. We found out she has Ehlers-Danlos, hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos, and it has caused dysautonomia. And so that impacts almost every aspect of her life. So as we were looking at schools for her, it was a matter of, where is she going to feel safe and secure and get the support she needs? And actually, she ended up choosing a school largely based on the disability access coordinator, because we made a point that any school we toured, we met with the disability access coordinator at that school. And so Shelby met the disability access coordinator at Washington College, which is nearby in Chestertown, which I liked a lot. And she just fell in love with her, and the two bonded instantly, and that helped Shelby make that decision. Now, unfortunately, that disability access coordinator has left as of this summer. And so she's going to have to work with somebody different, but now that she's there, she really likes it, and she's excited about being on campus. And thankfully Pick hired her, so she's not going too far. And her name is Maria, and she's one of our transition staff now. But so, there's all that. And then also make sure that at that last meeting in high school, when you're getting ready to leave school, the 504 plan that you develop there, and you do need to develop a 504 plan as they're leaving high school, is very important. Harrison was stubborn and refused to take it and sign up with disability access when he first got to college. And sure enough, about halfway through sophomore year, we ran into a situation where it was very important that he had his 504 plan from high school with him to demonstrate his needs, and that there was a long history of his diagnosis and what works for him and those kinds of things. And then also that power of attorney document became very valuable at that point as well. So making sure that you have all those things in place before they leave for school, if they're going to college, is huge. And then, there is nothing wrong with not going to college. A lot of, we all think we really want, we really want our kids to go to college, and that's great. And it's great for some kids, but not great for all kids. So like I said, my oldest was type A all the way through high school. Grades were great. She, was going to set the world on fire, and she was going to go study very high level things. And a year of college in, and it was not for her. The physical demands, the emotional demands, all of it, she didn't want to do it. And so she left and she found a job. Thankfully, she already was kind of doing some side work in a field that she was very, very passionate about. And so she transitioned into that as her full-time career, and she's not living at home, and she's, kind of off doing her thing. But again, it was about finding that passion for her and helping her figure out how to make that work. And then the last thing I'll share is, for We have been very fortunate. Our oldest three are most definitely going to move out and be independent. Harrison's home, but it's definitely temporary. he reminds me of that all the time. And my youngest, or my middle one, Shelby, she's off as well. My youngest may not be. But so what we've really always tried to do with our kids is make sure that they know that we're here, and that we really want them to be independent, but that we're a safe place to land. We're not a safe place to stay. We're a safe place to land. And I think that's very important. You know, somebody the other day said, well, how do you keep them from just bouncing back and forth and staying there their whole lives? And for us, you know, even with their disabilities, and, you know, they can come home, but there has to be a plan. You can't just be sitting here wait. As I said to my oldest one time when she was home for a little while, I said, you can't just be here waiting for your life to happen to you. We need a plan. And so what underscores, I think, all of that we talk about with transition is plan. It's plan and flexibility with that plan, but there's always a plan. And so that's what I would share. Tika, you have your hand up.
I just wanted to piggyback real quick on what Latoya was saying about having an advocate. I have an advocate myself, and you know, I've advocated and gone to IEP meetings for other people, and as strong as my own knowledge base is, I still have an advocate for my son. And he's actually had two. So you know, for parents that are interested in getting an advocate, if it isn't the right fit, doesn't mean that may not be something that's right for you, but or what you might need at that moment. But for me, what I felt why I felt like having my advocate is important is sometimes just having another person in the room with me that can hear things and kind of help balance me if I feel like I am ready to make an emotional decision, even though if I would have sat and thought about it, I may have gone a different route, or just to bounce ideas off of later. And to that point, as I shared, our year started off rocky. And because of that, I held an IEP meeting every single month, all the way up until, we didn't have one in June, but all the way up until May 30th was our last IEP meeting. And so, you know, for other parents, if you're not aware of it, the school is required to hold an annual IEP meeting, but as a parent, you can request one at any time and as often as you want. And so, you know, in the beginning, like I said, I had one every month, but excuse me, after a couple months, they realized the value in that, as well as my expectation. And so they kind of would start to get into me, okay, what date do you want to set for next month? And so we kind of turned them into data-driven decisions. And, you know, I think having an advocate just in the room just for you to feel supported is helpful as well.
Absolutely. And Suzanne, you're muted, by the way, but I just want to circle back to what you were saying about the planning and just give one more just absolutely unashamed plug for the student-led IEP. And this is why I push that so much and advocate for that so much, is that having that, it's as almost like a training tool for taking you into your life, because you're going to go out there, and yes, there's disability access specialists at college and, you know, whatever, but you might also just, when you go into the workplace, which might be right out of school or whatever, that it's really important. It's crucial that you have, you know, the experience, the confidence to go out there and ask for those accommodations that you're going to need in the workplace, whether it's something physical, whether it's, you know, there's all sorts of things that can play into it that are going to be with you, but this is something that you're living with. It's not like, oh, I turned 18, so now my autism is over, or now I'm going to get up out of this wheelchair, or I can suddenly see better. You know, whatever you've got going on, you're going to have going on through your life. And you need to be able to advocate for yourself, whether it's at college, to say, this is what I need, and, you know, to make my learning experience better, or to put me on the level playing field with all the others, you know, or whatever, or in the workplace. And being able to advocate for yourself like that is just such a huge part of it, because, you know, you need to be able to do that, because you're going to be, you know, on your own as an adult, you know, mostly, that you go out there in the world. And practicing that through those student-led IEPs, it really gets you used to saying, hey, this is about me, and I should be driving this because I'm the one who has the thoughts about it. Here's what I think I need. Here's where I want to go. And here's how you can help me get there, or at work or at college or whatever. I am here now, and this is what you can do to make this experience better for me. just like the IEP and the 504 stuff did when you were at school. So it's really important, and it's a great tool that's going to take them, through their life as they transition into adulthood, because they're going to have to ask for accommodations, and they're entitled to have them. They're absolutely entitled to them. If this is what you need, to make your experience better in the workplace and life, and whatever it is, that having the courage, having the confidence to say, it's, you don't need to fix me to fit into the world. You need to fix this world to accommodate me, because I'm allowed to be here and participate like everybody else. And it's really important to have that, to carry that with you in your heart and in your head, and to know who you are, and that it's okay to ask for those things, and it's absolutely okay to expect to receive them.
And Kelly talking reminded me of one other thing that I just want to bring up real quick. And I'm not going to let Kelly talk on this subject because we'll be here till Tuesday. But, and Harrison, if you want to turn your camera off so nobody sees you blushing, you can do that. I want to bring a sensitive subject up. And we're not going to dig too much into it. Like I said, Kelly is planning some sessions later this summer, later this fall on this topic. But for all the parents in the room whose children have disabilities or are on the spectrum, they're still human beings. And they are going to have relationships, and they're going to have social experiences. And I think one of the things that I am most glad we did before Harrison left for college is to spend a lot of time talking through those relationship dynamics. We talked a lot about consent. We talked a lot about safety. We did not send him to college thinking that he was not going to do things that might make mama a little nervous. Kids in college are going to be exposed to drinking. They're going to be exposed to drugs. They're going to be exposed to physical relationships and expectations of physical relationships. And those are all, our kids, regardless of what their disability is, they're still humans that have those interests or desires or urges or whatever. And it's really important as parents that we prepare them for that. Knock on wood, we've kind of joked a lot in our house because that's how we deal with things. That, Harrison didn't end up in jail. He did not end up arrested. We did not have any complaints that I'm aware of, but it's important that we had a lot of conversations about that before he left. It's important to remember that. And so regardless of whether you're sending your child off to college or they're living at home, but they're going to start having some independence, make sure that you've talked that through with them. We have sex ed in school for kids that are neurotypical, but it doesn't address some of the ways that that's different for kids who aren't. And so it's very, very important that we as families prepare our children for not just the work world and not just the school world, but for the social world as well. And I'm going to leave it at that. And as I said, pay attention to the PIC Facebook page, the PIC website. So Kelly is very excited to be bringing some sessions on those topics this fall, and she's got some great partners she's lining up because it's incredibly important. Harrison, anything you want to say to wrap it up now that I've embarrassed you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, after being embarrassed, that is incredibly important. But I want to go back to what Kelly was saying kind of sort of a second ago. And, just make sure that everybody knows that, as we're looking specifically towards college or high school and then to college, these schools are almost desperate for students with exceptionalities. For so long, so many kids have been told that it's not an option and it's not possible. And now the reasoning isn't exactly the best, but colleges don't have a database of students with exceptionalities, and it's backfiring on a lot of them now. And so they are desperately trying to build a sturdy database of students with exceptionalities. And so, while it may always seem like your child wasn't made to go to college, or they don't think they can, it's a lot more accessible this year than it was last year, and last year than it was the year before, and it just keeps getting better and better every year. And I think if one thing I want to highlight most is that it's totally different than I ever would have imagined it being. The resources that are on campus that are available 24/7 are, almost fail proof for all students. So, I think if I could say one more thing before we go, it's just don't let, a preconceived notion of what something is, or, your ideas of what you've been told or what to expect kind of dictate the way you and your child go about life and go about transitioning, because we've always said in our house, if we want to do something and if we have the idea that we want to do something, it is possible. Everything that you guys want to do is possible. College is always a possibility. Going out, joining the workforce, being independent is always a possibility. So, it's just up to you and your child to find the best way for them to navigate a world that wasn't exactly made for them. So that's all I got.
I think that was a great wrap up sentence. Any other questions?
Thank you, Harris.
Thank you to everybody for being here today.
Real quick, I don't have
Sure.
a question. I'm just chiming in. My name is Natalie. I've been with PIC literally for the past 15 years. And I just wanted to let anyone who has not taken advantage of the opportunity to take advantage of the Family Leadership Academy. It's very helpful. And I want to just make sure that everybody takes advantage of it. So just a side note.
Thank you.
And put my emails in the chat. So I'll talk to everybody, offline if you have any questions. I've gone through it. So yeah,
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, Natalie.
no problem.
Anya?
I was just about to say, just briefly, what is Family Leadership Academy?
Girl.
Okay, since you asked, I will shamelessly plug. So the PIC Family Leadership Academy is a series of trainings that we conduct to help parents and families understand more about, kind of the history of special education and accommodations, even outside of special education for children with disabilities. We talk about ways to address conflict, ways to advocate for yourself, for other people. It's a 10-week. Well, we do it a couple different ways. It is 10 sessions. Sometimes we do that over the course of 10 weeks. Sometimes we do it in 2 days. However we do it, it's an opportunity for parents to get a little bit more background on, how to advocate, whether it's internally for their own family or for others to get involved in those leadership opportunities. And one of the things, somebody mentioned this earlier in the chat, getting involved with groups, or it might have been LaToya actually, getting involved with groups where you can be, as a family leader or a parent mentor, which is another program that we're getting ready to launch, or, working in volunteering and advocacy, things like that, is a great way to not only to support others, but I have learned so much through the years when I've been volunteering or in those types of roles. So it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it can be very impactful, and it can help you to kind of open your own horizons as to what's out there. So yeah, Anya, make sure that you're on our mailing list and that you are in our system, that you check our website, check our Facebook page. And we'd love to have you at a future installment of the Family Leadership Academy. We're wrapping up one session on Wednesday of this coming week that we've been running in partnership with the Christina School District. We will be doing it again this fall. So stay tuned for that. And there's some other great things coming up on the horizon. We're actually meeting, the PIC staff is meeting next week to go over our calendar for the year and kind of set some of those programs in place. So stay tuned is what I've got for that.
That's the perfect plug. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to say real quick, thank you, Nancy, Jackie. I think we might have lost Lauren. I'm not seeing her, but thank you to everyone, Kelly, who has made this possible today. We weren't sure, Nancy and I were not sure that it was going to happen. We had it's been a little bit of a roller coaster, but I think it ended up being a great session. Not a ton of us here, but we impacting 1 or 2 families. We've seen the ripple effect that can have, and we're very grateful for those of you that are here today and that kind of stayed with us. I think this ended, it was a great day, I think. I know that the conversations were great. The information's been wonderful. I learned a couple things from both Jackie and Lauren, so thank you for that. Don't forget, Easter Seals provides a lot of amazing services to families as well. We ended the day kind of talking a lot about PIC, but Easter Seals has a lot of wonderful services, and they have an event coming up the end of the summer, which I'm sure Nancy would love to plug one more time.
Sure. Yep. We have our annual caregiver conference, August 23rd. So I can put the link in the chat again, or I don't know if you guys, I don't know, Suzanne, if you can just pull it from where I put it in at the beginning.
Look.
But our theme is humor is the best medicine, or laughter is the best medicine. So it's going to be an opportunity to learn some things, have some fun, meet other caregivers. We're having exhibitors come back again this year. So we're very excited about it. It's a free event. So feel free to register, or if you have any questions, you can contact me, contact our case managers. We're happy to help, not just with that, but with anything that you might need on your caregiving journey. That one of the many resources that's available to you, in addition to the people that you've heard from today. So thank you all for being here. I learned a lot too. It's not an area that I work in a lot, so it was great to hear all the information.
And thank you to Harrison. He got woken up on a Saturday morning to come and talk, but I appreciate you being willing. He's always willing to share his story. He does a pretty good job. I'm a little biased over here, but so with that, I think we're pretty much done. I am going to be sending out an email hopefully later today, but it could be as late as Monday, with a survey. We really hope that you will take a moment to fill out the survey. Fill out the survey, and then we can add you to our mailing list if you'd like. I'm sure Nancy has a mailing list that we could offer them adding to as well. And then it'll help us to serve people better in the future, and help us to know if you need any supports from any of us. So with that, everyone enjoy what looks like it's going to be a very cloudy but pleasant weekend. And thank you all so much for coming. I hope to see y'all again soon.
Thank you.
So much for having
you.
us.
Bye.
Everyone.